Chapter 1190. Tan Dingxian was presiding over the array. When she saw the river approaching, she quickly raised the jade mallet and struck several talismans. The light outside the array became brighter. In a flash, the mystic water rushed down like a waterfall and collided with the golden clouds. The two sides pressed against each other, neither giving way. However, as the water on the opposite side grew stronger and surrounded the array was also forced to shrink. Soon, it was less than half of its original size. Seeing that the situation was not good, he shook the bronze bell in his hand, and bronze lamps emerged from the array. The twin flames of yin and yang floated above, and the soft water supported the mountain below, and the heart was the grass. Originally, the fire in the lamps was weak, but as he cast the spell, it gradually became stronger, as if a great help had been added to the array. The light expanded a little, and the situation was finally stabilized. Jinren Kongjing was not in the mood to care about the battle at the moment. He was only thinking about how to protect the sacred tree and the Donghua continent. Hall Master Su Heng thought for a moment, then stood up and said, "I think that the Yutsang sect used some means to borrow the body of the sun-swallowing green locust. Otherwise, even if we all attack together, it would be difficult for us to defeat this demon. Why would we need to bite the great coiled wood?" Kongjing nodded, but he also knew that even if it was only the body of the sky demon, it would not be easy to deal with, so he looked at Xiao Lingyun and said, "Sect Master Xiao, what should we use to kill this demon locust?" After careful consideration, Xiao Lingyun replied, "Don't blame us. We don't know yet. We need someone to attack one or two sides." Palace Master Su Heng suggested again, "Enlightened Master, even though the floating river is difficult to cross, every sect has people guarding it. Why don't we ask them to come out and try to make a move? It would be best if we could solve it, and it would save us a lot of trouble." Jinren Kongjing heard this. He nodded subconsciously and looked at the cultivators of the sections. Xiao Lingyun hurriedly said, "I will try to send a message to the sect." The Yuanyang sect had lost their sect master, Chu Rui, and they had yet to elect a new sect master. Everything would be decided by Jinren Fu for now. Because this matter was related to the safety of the Donghua continent, she felt that she was duty-bound. After thinking for a while, she said to Bu Jingsu, "Elder Bu, the Sky River is blocking the way. I'm afraid it would be difficult to send a letter back. Do you have a psychic jade wall so that I can inform the sect?" Bu Jingsu replied, "Of course there is, please follow me." Shang Shooting was more concerned about this divine tree than anyone else. He said in a low voice, "I will go with you." In the Mingbai mountain of the primordial Yang sect, Qiao Jingdao had just become a grotto heaven not long ago. Like Chu Rui, he cultivated that person's technique and had great potential. They were afraid that he would die on the battlefield. Therefore, he came to the mountain to guard the gate. His temperament was calm. He knew that this was his family's responsibility, and he couldn't leave without permission. Thus, no matter how chaotic the outside world was, he didn't care and just focused on cultivating in the cave. At this moment, a boy knocked on the door and reported, "Jinren, there is movement on the shadow jade wall." Qiao Jingdao acknowledged and turned to the side hall. He stood in front of a psychic jade wall and waved his sleeve. Jinren Fu's figure appeared. Jinren Fu told him what happened and reminded him to be careful before leaving. Qiao Jingdao pondered and said, "Since it is a sky demon, its body must be tough. Only a killing weapon can subdue it. Looks like I can only go to the sword hall and ask the two Zenrens to come." When Chu Rui left this time, he brought almost all his treasures with him. But after his death, the Dayuan and Jingxin swords returned to the sect. Fortunately, this was a critical moment. After Chu Rui's death, Qiao Jingdao seemed like he was going to take over the position of the sect master. After explaining everything in detail, the two swords just now were willing to follow. He held the swords and left the sect, flying with all his might. He headed in the direction of the great immortal tree. Not long after, he arrived in front of the tree. He saw a Taoist using a lightning sword to attack the body of the demon locust, but the result was very little. The demon locust was almost unharmed, and it paid no attention to the Taoist, only gnawing on the tree trunk. He recognized that this was Jinren Yi of the Taihao sect. He went forward to greet him and also took out 2 swords. He went forward to slash, but the 2 swords only left 2 marks on the back of the demon locust. He couldn't help but feel surprised. That Xinjian shook and turned into a Taoist. He said, Jinren Qiao, previously when we fought with the North Sea sword, our swords were slightly damaged. You haven't refined the 2 of us, so it's difficult for us to use our abilities. I'm afraid that even if we slash 100 or 1,000 times, we won't be able to do anything to this thing. Qiao Zhengdao said in a low voice, if 100 or 1,000 times doesn't work, then 1,000 or 10,000 times. We can't just ignore it. Xinjian sighed and said, up to you. Not long after, Jinren Xian of the Nanhua sect also arrived on a scarlet eagle. However, his sect's talismans had all been taken away, so he could only rely on his own magic power. The 3 of them surrounded the demon locust and used all their strength, but they couldn't do anything to it. After about a quarter of an hour, a ray of light suddenly flew over from the southwest. The 3 of them felt that the person coming was not friendly. They all stopped and revealed vigilant expressions. When the ray of light came close, it stopped. A tall and handsome young Taoist walked out. He looked down and said, since everyone is here, you can stay. Qi Hengchan. The 3 of them suddenly realized that this Ping Du sect master's aura was far stronger than theirs. From the looks of it, he seemed to have cultivated to the nascent embryo realm. They instantly felt that something was wrong. If it was really as they expected, even if the 3 of them worked together, they couldn't defeat this person. Qiao Zhengdao made a prompt decision and said, Jinren, retreat quickly. I'll stop him. He raised his hand and 2 sword lights flew out at the same time. When Qi Hengchan saw the 2 murderous swords coming at him, his expression became serious. With a wave of his sleeve, a canopy flew out and protected his body. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and pointed. Raging flames came crashing down. It looked like it was right in front of his finger, but it suddenly appeared close to Qiao Zhengdao, as if it had crossed all the distance between the 2 of them. Qiao Zhengdao couldn't help but be shocked. At this moment it was impossible for him to dodge even if he wanted to, so he could only withdraw a protective treasure and release a strand of light to envelop his body. However, when he was struck by the flames, he was shaken to the point his soul trembled, and he almost fell from the clouds. His heart couldn't help but sink. He knew that with his own ability, he couldn't fight against a nascent embryo cultivator. At this moment, a ray of green light flew over from the sky and protected him. At the same time, a voice sounded in his ear, saying, Jinren Qiao, don't panic. With this great immortal tree here, he can't hurt us at all. He turned around and saw Jinren Yi making hand seals. The green light came from the great tree. However, this light could only cover a radius of a few miles. It looked like it couldn't be moved. When Qi Hengchan saw them like this, he smiled and didn't attack anymore. If the 3 of them stayed here, they couldn't attack the demon locust. His purpose of coming here had been achieved. When the divine tree was destroyed, it didn't matter if the 3 of them lived or died. In the Nether Spring sect, Elder Xianyu saw this scene and said, Sect leader, it seems like Yu Xiao can't hold on much longer. My fate is connected with him now. Should we help? Liang Xuani said, Yu Xiao school isn't just capable of this. Don't worry about it. We just need to deal with the Shaoqing sect. He turned around and looked in the direction of the Shaoqing sect. Under the continuous attack of the virtual images, the Shaoqing sect's absolute pleasure of heaven's heart technique was almost unable to stop them. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and asked, Is the spirit cave guarded by people? Elder Xianyu said, with 2 Taoists guarding there shouldn't be a problem. Liang Xuani pondered for a while and said, Not enough. With these virtual images, the 6 sects will have fewer casualties. Go personally and don't guard it. Don't let anything happen. Elder Xianyu was stunned and said, Sect leader, if I go, Sect leader, with Shaoqing sect's temper, they might come out before the mountain gate formation was broken. This group of sword cultivators was not so easy to deal with. Although they gathered the power of the 6 sects this time, they did not dare to underestimate them. If any cultivator was missing, it might lead to a lack of power, not to mention that 3 people were missing at once. Liang Xuani said, Yu Xianshao isn't easy to deal with. If he comes out, I need to focus on dealing with him and can't care about other things. If Pu Xianqing from the Huanjin sect goes to the spirit cave, just the 2 of us may not be able to stop him. Elder Xianyu took a step back and bowed. As you command. Inside the formation of Butian Pavilion, Jinren Kongjing felt his qi was getting heavier and heavier. This was a sign that his fate energy was gradually being cut. His face couldn't help but darken. Their sects seemed to be in a stalemate with the Qinsang school here. Their morale seemed to be very high, but they didn't know how long it would take to break the mountain gates formation. The cultivators of the 3 sects couldn't move under the big immortal tree. Not to mention that no one could save them, even the mountain gates of the 3 sects became abnormally empty. If the situation continued to deteriorate, they would die without a fight. Right now, there was only one way, and that was to break the obstruction of the heavenly river. Then, they could use their magic treasures to help. They could even send people to deal with the demonic insects. They could even open up a path of retreat. However, this price, he pondered for a while, then pointed behind him and said, Leader Tan, the situation is critical. Please use that mysterious technique to break the obstruction of the heavenly river. Leader Tan's body trembled. He said, but immortal, if, Jinren Kongjing said in a deep voice, I know what the consequences will be, but if we don't save the big immortal tree, we can't even talk about coming down. The technique he was talking about was the last mysterious technique that Butian Pavilion possessed. It was called, Boundless and Boundless, Zhou Yutong Tian. The power of this technique was extremely great, but it did not differentiate between self and enemy. Once it was released, any technique that disturbed the position, seized the spiritual opportunity, and stored the void would all be broken. Even the immovable circumference and Yuan Tian beyond the sky from before would be broken. What was more powerful was that even the mountain gates formation, the 9 continents' small worlds, and the cultivator's heavenly abode could collapse under this technique. Tan Dingxian was silent. After a long time, he finally nodded. Xiao Lingyun said in shock, Hold on. There are many disciples hiding in the small world's heavenly abode. Should we move them out first? If the small world's heavenly abode collapsed, those who weren't the immortal abode of the heavenly abode would be doomed. Jinren Kongjing said, It's too late. If our disciples die, we can still recruit more. If the divine tree falls, Donghua will no longer exist, and our fate will be gone. We will die immediately because of the technique. It's up to you to decide which is more important. When everyone heard what he said, they didn't say a word. Jinren Kongjing then said, Send someone to inform the 6 sects of Ling School. Don't blame me for not informing them when the time comes. Chapter 1191. After Jinren Kongjing sent someone to inform the Devil sect, he said, If it's convenient for you, sect leader Tan, please cast the spell. Tan Dingxian bowed, then looked at everyone present and said, Fellow Taoists, please guard your own grotto heavens. I'm going to cast the spell now. Everyone looked at each other and sat down cross-legged, their expressions extremely solemn. In fact, if they wanted to guard their grotto heavens securely, it would be best to enter the grotto heavens. That way, the inside and outside of the grotto heavens would be in harmony, and there would be a high chance of passing through safely. However, no one knew how powerful this mystic technique was. If they fell into the void realm, even if they did not die immediately, they would not be able to return. To be safe, no one dared to make such a choice. Tan Dingxian floated away and returned to the outside of the pavilion. He took out a jade talisman and threw it down. Mystic techniques passed down by predecessors usually needed to be enchanted with enchanted artifacts or strange treasures as sustenance. Otherwise, they could only be maintained for a few hundred years at most. And this, boundless, technique was attached to this square diagram. The jade talisman fell, as if it had fallen into the endless void. It turned into a speck of starlight and gradually went far away. At the moment when it was about to disappear, a spark suddenly burst out and rapidly spread in all directions with the square diagram as the center. Not long after, the land of the 9 continents was enveloped within it. At this moment, all the cultivators from the various sects who did not hide in the grotto heavens of the small worlds, as well as the rogue cultivators hidden deep in the mountains, as long as their magic power had not reached a certain level, their universe sleeves were immediately torn apart, and the magic treasures and artifacts inside were all shattered as the technique descended. On the contrary, some of the junior disciples did not have such items with them, so they did not suffer any losses. And this was just the beginning. This mystic technique did not all surge out in one go. Instead, it was like the tide, surging forward in waves, and its power was also stronger than the previous one. After this ray of light passed, very quickly, the second ray of light arrived. Wherever it went, the mountain gate formations of the small sects all collapsed. Many of the flying peaks floated in the sky. Many floating mountains and pavilions fell from the sky, and there were even collapsing mountains and cave dwellings that collapsed. Instantly, there were countless casualties. Wails could be heard everywhere. Zhang Yan also saw this phenomenon in the devil treasury, and his brows involuntarily twitched. Suddenly, his sleeve fluttered, and the dragon's soul essence leaped out. However, it was obstructed by the devil treasury and was unable to leave. He thought for a while and first moved to avoid the tribulation fire. Then, he walked out. Then, they went outside. The item turned into a beam of light and disappeared into the sky. His eyes flashed. He immediately knew that the profound technique that the Qinsang school had used was about to be activated. At this moment, a voice rang in his ears. It was sect leader Qin's voice transmission, telling him to be careful of the Yuxiao school's Xian technique. After listening carefully for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, "Disciple respectfully thanks sect leader Jinren for passing on the message." This technique was aimed directly at the grotto heaven. He did not know if he could avoid it by hiding in the devil's treasury. After thinking for a moment, he made up his mind and entered the Xianyuan Utopia. He'd established the Spirit Splendor Paradise, a true world of its own. It was not like the inner utopia, which needed to cling to the heaven and earth. If the tide of spiritual opportunity was slightly disturbed, it could be overturned. If even he couldn't withstand it, then there were only a few people in this world who could. To say the least, he really could not withstand it. That was not something that could happen in an instant. Before it shattered, he had already escaped. The only worry was that the tribulation fire would jump in and disturb him. Hence, he still needed to use the devil's treasury to protect himself. In the outside world, not long after the second beam of light dissipated, the third beam of light bloomed. This time, it was fiercer and fiercer than the previous two. Many Jinren of the grotto heaven felt their bodies tense up, as if they were in a storm. They knew that the crucial moment had arrived. They quickly made up their mind and focused their minds. They continuously moved their mana and spiritual opportunity to maintain their own grotto heaven. The Jinren of the grotto heaven who'd established their own grotto heaven were fine as they were extremely compatible with the inner world. As for those who inherited it from their ancestors, it was a little difficult. However, without the grotto heaven, it meant that they had lost a way to escape. If others had it but you didn't, then it was very likely that you would die before your opponent. Hence, they clenched their teeth and persevered. At that moment, the only one who was not affected was Tan Dingxian, the person who cast the technique. After about 100 breaths, the sound of the profound technique gradually weakened. Everyone thought that they had dodged it, but who knew that at this time, there was a rumbling sound in their ears, and a spirit aura that was several times more intense than before suddenly exploded out. In an instant, other than the 4 sect leaders, the nascent embryo cultivators, and a few grotto heaven cultivators with profound mana, the rest of the grotto heaven cultivators' grotto heaven started to collapse. Many of them knew that there was no way to salvage the situation. They sighed and gave up on trying to salvage the situation. At least, they could use less mana. Only a few of them refused to give up and were still trying their best to hold on. Jinren Kongjing hadn't stopped yet. He still looked calm as if he wasn't affected at all. He looked outside and saw that the profound technique on the top of the sky had not been broken yet. The White River still existed outside. He knew that it was not the end of the profound technique, so he didn't dare to relax. Not long after, the fifth spiritual opportunity surged up. In an instant, there were rumbling sounds that resounded in the sky above the 9 continents. At that moment, all the small worlds that were not protected by anyone were broken, and the cultivators hiding in them were all dead. At that moment, above the Chinsung school, there was a long roar. A huge kun appeared and spread its body, causing the entire sky to darken. However, it covered the small worlds of the Chinsung school and its allies. As for the Grotto Heaven cultivator's Grotto Heaven, it was too weak for the kun. If it used too much force, it would easily ruin it, so it didn't care. Jinren Kongjin gasped and said in shock, "Huge kun. I didn't expect Tai Ming Jinren to leave this thing behind." However, after thinking about it again, he relaxed. However, when he turned around, he saw that the expressions of the spiritual masters around him were not right. Some of their eyes were filled with fear. Knowing that it was inappropriate, he immediately said loudly, "Everyone, don't panic. This kun was very powerful 10,000 years ago. However, in the past 10,000 years, the spiritual opportunity of heaven and earth has changed. It's difficult for such a strange creature to survive in the world. At this time, protecting a few small worlds is probably its limit. It can't touch us." Just now, when Xiao Lingyun saw the kun, she was also shocked. If it wasn't for the oath, she almost had the urge to transfer to the Chinsung school. However, after hearing a few words, she immediately came to a realization and said, "Daoist Kong Zheng is right. If this kun could touch me, why would it release it now? The outcome would have been decided long ago." Sure enough, just like what Kong Zheng said, the kun only floated in the sky and did not do anything else. As they spoke, the 6th Spiritium rushed over. As it passed, the white mist river that lingered between the heavens and earth finally dissipated. Along with it, the 2 Xian techniques, Yuan Tian Beyond Heaven, and Immovable Circumference, disappeared. Not only that, the mountain gate formation also showed signs of collapsing. Even the Butian Pavilion's square formation map and the defensive Forbidden Formation were slowly dissipating. The only good thing was that after destroying so many small worlds and grottos, a lot of spiritual opportunity was immediately released, and the world was also cleared. Jinren Kongjin looked over and saw that although the mountain gate formation of Chinsung School was affected, it was protected well. Although there were signs of collapse, it would not be broken in a short period of time. He said, "Everyone, don't worry about Chinsung School for now. Getting rid of the demon locust is the most important thing." Just now, Xiao Lingyun saw Qiao Jingdao and the others fighting against the demon locust, and she already had some clues. She said, "It seems that the demon locust only has a body for Chinsung School, so it should be easy to deal with it." Even though the demon locust's body was hard to break, it did not have the baleful essence to protect its body. After all, it was not an invulnerable body. As long as one used magical treasures, it could be suppressed. The simplest way was to move it to another place, or simply use magical treasures to suppress it. It was just that Qiao Jingdao and the other 2 did not have deep cultivation, or they did not have the ability to do so, so they could not do anything about it. Now that the Milky Way had disappeared, the people here could return to help. After a short discussion, the Yuxiao School Palace Master Zhou Fenggong temporarily took charge of the overall situation, while Jinren Kongjing, Xiao Lingyun, and Shang Shooting went to deal with the demon locust. The rest of them did not move. In front of the big pan wood, Qi Hongchan saw that the Milky Way was broken, and there were 3 rays of light coming from the north. He wanted to stay behind to hold them back, but at this moment, he heard sect leader Qin's voice. His expression changed, and he looked at the 3 of them. With a cold laugh, he leaped up and flew back to the direction of the mountain gate. Jinren Kongjing did not chase after them. The other party was already a third-degree realm cultivator. If they fought, it was unknown how long it would take. The most important thing now was to deal with the demon locust. Although Shang Shooting was anxious, he calmed down here. He carefully looked at the demon locust for a moment, then said, "Fellow Taoist Kongjing, please use your technique." Jinren Kongjing nodded, and used a vast cloud of one-breath sky technique, trapping the two of them and the demon locust. He then pointed, and used mana to fix it in place, and said, "Fellow Taoist, quickly make your move." Shang Shooting knew that he could not stay calm for long, and did not dare to hesitate. He took out a bamboo branch, and threw it forward. It instantly turned into a ray of green light, trapping the demon locust inside. It was not enough to suppress the demon locust. Xiao Lingyun took out the South Flower Master Imperial Spirit Bird's chart, and pointed at the strange locust. A white crane came out, and with a peck, it swallowed the green light. He made a hand seal and recalled the white crane. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoists, with my map temporarily suppressing it, the demonic insect definitely won't be able to escape within 8 to 9 days. Jinren Kongjing turned to look at the great pool of Dragon Lake, and said in a deep voice, "Why do we need 8 to 9 days? I think we will see the result in 1 or 2 days." At this moment, the Jade Sky sect had already stopped attacking. Since the Mountain Gate's great formation was about to be broken, they did not have to attack. They only had to wait for the moment to come. However, the stream of mystical water was still lingering above the great lake of Dragon Abyss. Hence, nobody dared to relax. They were only accumulating their mana and spiritual opportunity in preparation for the upcoming battle. Chapter 1192. The distant Milky Way technique was broken, and the great formation of the Mountain Gate was also in danger, but none of the people from Qinsang School revealed a dejected expression. Judging from the previous understanding of the situation, just now, that profound technique was the last resort of Butian Pavilion. If there were to be any more battles, it would depend on each clan's foundation. The Yutsang sect had prepared for a long time. They were prepared against the unprepared, and they were prepared against the unprepared. Their chances of winning were higher than their opponents. After a few hours, a ray of light flew into the hall and went straight to the main seat. It was the dragon's soul essence that had been summoned back. Sect leader Qin extended his hand and grabbed it. He swept his horsetail whisk on it, and then threw it into the hall. In an instant, it hovered high up, and kept spinning there. At the same time, the shadow of a dragon could be seen spinning in it. The people on the seats looked at it, and knew that the first few tests had been passed. From now on, it was time to officially start the attack. At this moment, outside the great pool of Dragon Lake, Tan Dingxian saw that the Dark Azure Sect's Mountain Gate Grand Formation was slowly disappearing, and the true appearance of the great pool of Dragon Lake was also gradually being revealed. Seeing that it wouldn't be long before it would be completely destroyed, she said, "Fellow Taoist Kongjing, are you preparing to make a move?" However, Jinren Kongjing extended his hand to stop her, and said, "Wait, it won't be too late for us to make a move when the battle starts at Shaoqing Mountain Gate." He said this because of two considerations. On the one hand, the Dark Azure Sect's great mysterious water formation had yet to be dispelled under the mysterious technique, and was still circling in the sky. However, even though the Heaven Mending Pavilion's protective formation was gone, it still had the ability to attack. This formation could be handed over to Tan Dingxian to deal with, but he still needed to be careful. On the other hand, Shaoqing Mountain Gate's great formation just now was also affected. It was originally under the siege of the Devil Sect, so it could only be destroyed faster than Qinsang School. Then, the next thing would be simple. With the strength of the 6 Devil Sects, in addition to the continuous stream of illusions, they would be able to eliminate them if there were no accidents. He didn't expect them to turn around and help after defeating Shaoqing. As long as he could hold back Qinsang School and protect the lives of the cultivators on his side, in the end, he only needed to use the flying feather technique to wipe out the other side. At this moment, he heard a sound coming from the west. The spiritual vigor suddenly became extremely chaotic. The Origin Room Hall Master came over and said, "Senior Apprentice Brother, it's a sound coming from the middle pillar state. It should be the Shaoqing sect's great formation collapsing." Senior Apprentice Brother's prediction was indeed correct. Jinren Kongjin pondered for a moment and said, "It did not collapse. It should have been Shaoqing's family who removed it." The palace master of Yuan was startled, then nodded and said, "This is indeed the style of the Shaoqing sect." Jinren Kongjin said, "The more it's at a time like this, the more we must not be careless. We must also be prepared to use whatever methods we need to use." He turned around and said to Xiao Lingyun, "Sect Master Xiao, I'll have to ask for your help later." Xiao Lingyun knew that her sect did not have any profound technique that could help the alliance. The weight that she was showing now was far from the Heaven-Mending sect and Taihao sect, so she could only put in effort elsewhere. She replied, "Our Nanhua sect will definitely do our best." Jinren Kongjin nodded slightly. At this moment, his gaze caught a glimpse of a sword light shooting out from the west. He smiled and said, "Shaoqing has made his move." Just now, when he said that, he seemed to have sensed something. His expression froze and he raised his head to look at the sky. Tan Dingxian and Xiao Lingyun did not know what was going on. They also looked up, but they did not see anything. Just after a while, the two of them realized that something was wrong. First, a thunder-like sound came from all directions, rolling and spreading everywhere. Following that, the entire spiritual vigor of heaven and earth also shook. At this moment, almost all the spiritual masters of the Grotto Heavens here felt that the place they were in was continuously falling. However, they immediately realized that it was not them who were sinking. Instead, the water of the four seas was like four walls that were continuously rising. Not long after, it passed over many mountains and rivers. However, even at such a high place, it did not slow down and continued to rise. From the looks of it, it would sooner or later cover the middle pillar continent. Jinren Kongjin circulated his mana. He sensed around and was shocked to see that all the seawater on the 9 continents was gathering in this place. Even the 3 continents that were originally half submerged in the ocean were revealed again. It was hard to imagine what such a huge amount of seawater could do. Facing this seemingly endless raging tide, he was also frightened. This Xian technique was called water sky hanging upside down. Sect leader Qin borrowed the power of the dragon soul essence to control the water of the 4 seas to flip into the vault of heaven and cover the 4 continents. At this moment, almost all the mountain sects had lost the protection of the formation, so they were completely defenseless. Even the cultivators of the Grotto Heavens would be deeply affected if they were to fight in the water. They would not be able to use their abilities as usual. On the other hand, this was very beneficial to the cultivators of the Qinsang school. Those who were skilled in water techniques could move freely. What was even more impressive was that the water contained the abyssal heavy water. Once it fell, not to mention that no one would be able to resist it, if all of it was pressed onto Jade Firmament Sect's Jade Cliff, it was unknown how long Master Lingya could withstand it with his transcendence energy. Sect leader Qin released this technique and swung his horsetail whisk. The water wall in the sky slowly pressed down. At first glance, it looked like the sky was collapsing. Sun Jinren saw that this was a great opportunity. He stood up and cupped his hands. "Master, fellow Daoist Shaoqing has already made his move. Since that Yuxiao school bullied us at our doorstep, we cannot allow them to be impudent anymore. Disciple requests for permission to fight." Sect leader Qin thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, but Yuxiao definitely has a backup plan. You need to be careful." The current situation was too advantageous to the Qinsang school. If this continued, no matter how many people came, they would just be sending themselves to death. Therefore, as long as Yuxiao's side had not given up, they would try to turn the situation around. Now, it was up to them to make their move. The 15 spiritual masters of the Grotto Heavens stood up and cupped their hands. "As you wish." After a moment, more than 10 rays of clear qi shot out from the floating sky and entered the water screen. In the Nether Springs sect, sect leader Liang Xuani frowned. This time, they had clearly forced the Shaoqing sect to fight and were about to gain the upper hand. However, they never thought that the Qinsang school would actually use such a profound technique. Although the Nether Springs sect had a long history, for 10,000 years, they had always been suppressed by the Xianmen. Even if he could compete with the three sect leaders, whether it was in terms of the sect's foundation or strength, he was still far from the three sections. Just like the raging ocean in front of him, if he spared no effort in using his mana and given enough time, he could deal with it. However, if he wanted to erase it in one go, it was impossible. He looked to the south and muttered, "Let's see how Lingye deals with it." Outside the Shaoqing sect, Elder Shui seemed to have gotten rid of his shackles since the forbidden teleportation technique was no longer used. He went back and forth to kill and teleport. It was truly carefree. At this moment, he leaped out of the void with an extremely carefree leap. With just one sword strike, he split an illusory image. Then, with a turn of his body, he leaped far out of the battle circle. He took some time to look at the water screen in the sky. Without thinking too much, he knew what the Qinsang school had done. He could not help but chuckle. However, he was not worried about how he would fight after entering the ocean. Even if there were some obstructions, as the opponent, Yu Xiao's side should be more restricted. In the sky above the four continents of Donghua, the overturning ocean pressed down and was about to cover the continents. At this moment, a chime was heard, and then a ray of spiritual light was cast from the south. A divine light suddenly appeared in Liang Xuani's eyes as he stared over, and he saw it extremely clearly. This light was emitted from the Jade Cliff, and the technique it executed was definitely attached to this treasure. Thus, its origins were worth pondering. Is it a mystic technique left behind by the previous generations of Master Lingye, or Jinren Yaohan? He took out a spell and began to examine it. After a while, he chuckled and said with a faint gaze, "So that's how it is." Once this technique is used, the outcome is hard to predict. However, without using this technique, it is indeed difficult to block the Qinsang school's technique. That ray of spiritual light quickly entered the Donghua continent, but it did not stop there. Instead, it spread outwards. Like the boundless and boundless technique, it enveloped the 9 continents. Sect leader Qin also saw it. He probed a little and immediately understood the mystery behind it. He transmitted his voice to all the Jinren under him. This is the space-splitting and world-chiseling technique. The mountains and rivers of the 9 continents are all separated and scattered. This technique does not seem to be something that Lingye can do. It should have been left behind by Jinren Yaohan back then. You all need to be careful. Elder Xianyu of the Nether Springs sect was originally sitting in the spirit cave. Suddenly, a strange feeling arose in his heart. He cast a spell to check the outside, but when he looked, his expression changed slightly. No matter how much he probed, he was always limited to a radius of 100 miles. What was even stranger was that there were a total of 3 of them. Just now, after the ocean in the sky fell, a fellow Taoist went out to check, but he hadn't returned yet. However, he didn't hear any sounds of battle, and he didn't know what happened. After thinking for a while, he called out to another fellow Taoist and leaped up the spirit cave. After a few dozen breaths, he was out of the spirit cave. However, what entered his eyes made him stunned. He was actually above a vast ocean. The waves were boundless, and his senses could only go as far as 1,000 miles. He wanted to probe further, but he could not. He stroked his beard and thought for a moment. When he was about to turn back, he found that the path he came from had disappeared. At this moment, sect leader Liang Xuani transmitted his voice to his ear. After listening carefully for a while, he understood his situation just now. He thought to himself, if that's the case, even if I don't move, there will be enemies coming to kill me. Since that's the case, I'll just wait here. On the other side, Zhang Yan also noticed the strange situation. In his senses, the entire world seemed to have become fragmented, divided into tens of thousands of small void worlds. If a cultivator passed through it, one moment he was in the southern cliffs continent, the next moment he could be in the western 3 continents. It was more likely that you wouldn't meet a single person for half a day, but once you did, there would be several enemies. Therefore, no matter which sect the disciple was from, fighting in this world depended entirely on their own luck. At this moment, his heart suddenly throbbed violently. His eyes flashed, and he looked towards the north. The divine beast was about to be born. Chapter 1193. Zhang Yan had a vague feeling that if the divine beast was born, he might be able to borrow its power to deal with the tribulation fire. However, to reach that place, he needed to pass through the layers of broken space. This was not easy. It was a place that could be reached in a moment. He might have to walk for 10 days to half a month, or even longer. This profound technique was used perfectly. Just now, when the Yutsang sect drew in the water of the four seas, they had already gained an absolute advantage. However, with the counterattack of Master Lingya, they had once again leveled the power of both sides. However, speaking of which, if Butian Pavilion did not use the Xian technique that could destroy the surrounding space just now, Yuxiao School would not be at ease to use this technique. He thought deeply for a while. Right now, the people of Donghua were really trapped. In order to deal with the enemy, they had to pass through it. Who knows, maybe he could find a correct path. With that thought, he sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and sensed with all his might. At this very moment, Palace Master Zhou Fenggong was standing on a high cliff, paying attention to the changes in the spiritual opportunity around him. Just now, when the Xian technique descended, he felt his vision blur, and he was in a valley. When he came out, he realized that he was in a completely different world. However, he calmed down because of this. In the Zhou clan, he was of the same generation as Kang Zheng and Bai Bai, so the secrets he knew were slightly more than the other members of the Zhou clan. He'd once faintly heard that the Zhou clan seemed to have a technique that could shatter the void. However, he was not clear about the specifics of this Xian technique. Before he understood the specific situation, he would rather stay where he was and not move. Suddenly, there was a ripple in the stream in front of him. He immediately stared over, and all the mana in his body started to circulate. After a while, he saw a handsome and elegant Taoist dressed in a feathered robe and a star crown walk out. He couldn't help but feel happy, and hurriedly went forward. He bowed and said, "Senior brother." Jinren Kangjing nodded slightly. Spiritual Master Yuancher looked left and right, and asked, "Is it just senior brother?" Jinren Kangjing said, "Of course, I came to find you first." Yuan Shizhinren was startled. Then, he changed his mind and said excitedly, "Then, senior martial brother, do you know how to travel through the void and find others?" Jinren Kangjing laughed, and said, "Since the esteemed master has used this profound technique, how could he not have a backup plan? Under master's guidance, I have already seen some of the mysteries of this technique." Although on the surface, the 9 continents seemed to be divided into countless void spaces, a chaotic and fragmented mess. When cultivators walked on it, they didn't know where they would be taken to, but there were actually tricks to follow. As for finding the whereabouts of the others, it would depend on Jinren Kangjing's own ability. For a person like him who had already refined the nascent embryo, if he did not care about using his magical power, he could observe the entire 9 continents in an instant. It was not difficult to detect people who were familiar with the qi, but if it was an enemy, he would not be able to detect them. However, if it was an enemy, he would have to spend more effort. Yuan Shihal Master had other thoughts, and he said, "Senior martial brother, in the Qinsang school, Meng Jida's skills are the highest. Since senior martial brother has such ability, why not find a few people of the same path and kill them? That way, the luck of the Qinsang school will be greatly damaged." Jinren Kangjing thought for a moment and then shook his head. "That is not appropriate. This person's cultivation technique is deep. If I can gather 5 or 6 people, under a situation where there is no one to help, I might be able to kill him. However, not to mention that it is not easy to find so many people in such a short period of time, even if they were all gathered, they might not all be able to reach this person." Yuan Shizhinren didn't understand. "Why is that?" Jinren Kangjing explained. Just now, he understood that there were other mysteries to this mysterious technique. The more people gathered, the more likely it was that they would be scattered to different realms when they traveled through the void. However, if 3 or 4 people traveled together, there wouldn't be such a restriction. However, at the same time that this move gave the enemy a chance of survival, it also protected their own people. In reality, to Jinren Kangzheng, people like Meng Zhide, even if he was really nearby, he wouldn't take the initiative to find him. In a battle between nascent core cultivators, even if one side had 2 or 3 people, the advantage was not big. If they fought, the outcome was really hard to predict. If they were not careful, they might even lose their lives. In this situation, it was unknown how long the battle would last. It was necessary to reduce the consumption of mana as much as possible. Those with profound cultivation techniques should avoid it as much as possible. Yuan Shijinren still didn't give up and said, "This is a rare opportunity. If we don't find Meng Zhide, why don't we find that Qi Yuntian? If we can kill him, we can also deal a heavy blow to the Qinsang school." Jinren Kangzheng said in a deep voice, "Although I can sense where everyone is, other than those I know, everyone else looks the same. It won't be easy to find this person. Right now, we can only take it one step at a time." Yuan Shijinren's lips moved, he wanted to say something but stopped. Jinren Kangzheng looked at him and said, "You want to ask why the master didn't pass down the acupoint of traveling in this world?" Yuan Shijinren hurriedly said, "I don't dare." Jinren Kangzheng said plainly, "I can tell you this clearly. To understand this path, you must first be able to peep into the 9 continents. If your cultivation is not enough, you can't feel the wonders of heaven and earth, even if you know it, it's useless." Yuan Shijinren didn't dare to ask further and quickly nodded in agreement. Jinren Kangzheng grunted and sensed something. He said, "Not far from here, there is a cultivator. Looking at his qi dynamic, he isn't from our sect. We will look for him now. If he isn't from our alliance, we can get rid of him first." He calculated on the spot and said, "Follow me." Then, he left first. Yuan Shijinren hurriedly followed him. Although it wasn't far, the two of them passed through dozens of different boundaries. They walked through deserts, mountains, oceans, and hills before they found this person. Yuan Shijinren looked over and saw a middle-aged Taoist in his 40s. He laughed and bowed, "So it's Jinren Zhao from Pingdu sect." When Jinren Zhao saw the two of them, his heart couldn't help but sink. He took a deep breath and bowed, "Greetings, Jinren Zhao." Jinren Kangzheng raised his hand slightly and returned the greeting. He said, "Jinren Zhao, now our 2 sects are enemies. Since we have met you, we must take your life." Jinren Zhao said in a deep voice, "Since we are in a calamity, who can escape? I am the same, Jinren Zhao is the same." Jinren Kangzheng smiled indifferently and didn't comment. Yuan Shijinren Kangzheng didn't say much. He flicked his sleeves and immediately performed a vast cloud of one-breath sky technique, encircling both of them in a world. Pingdu sect and Qinsang school were allies. Since Jinren Zhao knew that he was going up against Yuxiao school, how could he not be prepared? After a few breaths, he used an ingenious method and broke out of it. It was a pity that he was facing 2 Yuxiao cultivators. Just now that he had escaped, he felt the scenery in front of him change, and he was actually dragged in again. He sighed and understood that if no one came to save him this time, he would definitely not be lucky. He gave up on the thought of survival and immediately used all the talismans he had on him. Then, he spread out his dharma and turned it into a 4-armed, 2-headed, 10,000-foot-tall god. It was surrounded by a dazzling golden light and rushed toward where the two of them were. However, when it was halfway there, it saw a starlight that covered the entire region rushing over. In a short moment, the Dharma disappeared under this light, and even its soul couldn't escape. Jinren Kangzheng waved his hand and calmly kept the remaining Hanli divine sand. He then removed the one-breath sky technique. Just now that he came out, he seemed to have sensed something and looked up at the sky. His brows furrowed slightly. Yuan Shijinren saw that his expression was strange and asked, "Senior brother? Jinren Kongjing pondered for a while and shook his head. He said, "Nothing, let's go to the next place." In the demon treasury, Zhang Yan retracted his gaze. From Jinren Kongjing's action of accurately finding Jinren Zhao just now, he could tell that even though the realms above the 9 continents looked broken and chaotic, there was a way of operation within. If he could figure it out, it wouldn't be difficult to find the right path. It was just that the other party had not passed through many realms, so it was hard to make a judgment. Since that was the case, he had to keep a close eye on this person. Even so, he would definitely sense it and try to cover up his chi dynamic, so that he wouldn't be able to see his specific actions. However, every place where the people of the heavenly abode were at must be a whirlpool that absorbed spiritual vigor. Yuan Shijinren was even better than his peers. As long as there was no formation to hide, no matter where he went, he would be able to find him. On the other side, Qi Yuntian was standing in the middle of the sky. Under his feet was a huge wave. Because he had cultivated the northern underworld true water, no matter where he went, there would definitely be waves and tides following him. From his point of view, instead of looking for opponents everywhere, it was better to take the initiative and transform a realm to make it his own. The land under his feet was tens of thousands of miles wide. It was originally a wasteland, but under the influence of his mana and spiritual vigor, as time passed, it gradually turned into a vast swamp country. About an hour later, nothing could be seen except the surging waves. If he was given enough time, it would not be difficult to turn this place into something similar to the Xianshui Palace. Then, it would truly be his home ground. At this moment, there was a gray fog in front of him. Above it stood a gray-robed Taoist with vague facial features. From the Qi dynamic, he immediately recognized that this was a cultivator from the Muqing cult. The gray-robed Taoist also recognized his identity when he saw his appearance. Initially, he seemed to have some intention to fight, but when he looked at the surrounding scene, he hesitated for a moment. Then, he turned around and turned into a cloud of smoke to escape. Qi Yuntian knew that the cultivators of the Muqing cult were best at hiding, and they also had the ability to spy from thousands of miles away. On the surface, it seemed that they had retreated, but it was very likely that they were hiding beside him, waiting for the right opportunity to attack. He definitely could not let them go. Thus, with a flick of his finger, tens of thousands of lightning bolts struck. At the same time, the waves below surged up and swept up. The gray-robed Taoist felt his body become heavy as soon as he was touched by the water mist. Seeing that there were lightning bolts chasing after him, he had to stop and fight. First, he stretched out his hand and a jade plate appeared above him, blocking the lightning bolts. Then, he took out a jade stone and threw it up. Instantly, it turned into thousands of mountains. He blew another mouthful of air, and all these mountains collapsed at the same time, transforming into surging dust and smoke that surged forward with the force to move mountains and push seas. Qi Yuntian recognized that this was one of the 3 supreme techniques of the Muqing cult, the technique of soaring dust. He wanted to end the battle quickly, so he had no intention to compete with the Taoist techniques. With a flick of his sleeve, a brilliant water light swayed out from the void. It was the heavens united divine water forbidden light. In the next instant, the light surged, and all the dust and mist were swept into the void by the light, leaving nothing behind. Chapter 1194. While Qi Yuntian was killing the elder of the chaotic world of the 9 continents, battles of all sizes were taking place in the chaotic world of the 9 continents. However, at this time, because they didn't know what was going on around them, they focused on protecting themselves. Other than encountering difficult opponents, they would try their best to avoid encountering people of the same generation. Even so, in just 2 hours, 5 enlightened masters of the heavenly abode were killed. Other than the 2 who died at the hands of Qi Yuntian and Jinren Kongjing, the rest were killed by the cultivators of the Shaoqing sect. One of them was a blood soul cultivator, one from the Netherworld Spring sect, and the last one was enlightened Master Guy from the Bone sect. The 3 of them were also unlucky. There were 3 extreme sword cultivators in the Shaoqing sect. After the 3 of them fell into the profound technique, they did not hesitate to use their magic power. In a short period of time, they circled the entire chaotic 9 continents and successfully gathered in one place. The 3 of them leaped into the air and killed at the same time. Almost no cultivator below the 3rd realm could resist them. Even though the 3 cultivators of the Devil's sect had many death substitution techniques, they were still killed. If the Devil's sect didn't have an endless supply of illusions, the number of people they lost would be far more. This was just the beginning. As more and more cultivators of the heavenly abode became familiar with the spatial shift, they would no longer be cautious and their movements would become bigger and bigger. Somewhere in the sky, Shaolin Yun, the leader of the South Flower sect, was riding on a 2-headed eagle. This spirit bird could be big or small, and it could also carry people to and fro. Although it couldn't cross the spatial shift, other than sword cultivators and a few people who were good at escape techniques, few people of the same generation could compete with him. Along the way, whenever he felt a spiritual fluctuation near him, he would avoid it and not come into contact with it. Not long after, they arrived at a place that was in the shape of a mountain. There were strange peaks and rocks everywhere, and there were ravines and valleys everywhere. After a few glances, he muttered to himself, "This is a good place to hide. Now that I'm here, I can cast spells." He knew that it was extremely dangerous for him to act alone. Even if he could win 1 or 2 people, after his magic power was used up, he would most likely lose his life. If he encountered another strong enemy, it was very likely that he would lose his life. Therefore, he decided to find a safe place and called out a mountain guarding spirit rock which was left behind by his founder. He then borrowed the sect leader's seal to control it from afar. This way, his chances of winning were high, and it wouldn't harm his magic power. If he had the chance to meet up with them, then even a 3rd stage realm cultivator might not be his opponent in a head-on battle. He kept the 2-headed eagle osprey into the beast-subduing pen and found a call to land on. He used his transcendence energy to open up a cave and hid inside. He then sealed the cave door and took out the sect leader's seal to communicate with the spirit rock. At the base of the Nanhua faction. On the surface, it looked no different than usual. There were only a few junior disciples and servants left on the mountain. Because these people's skills were low and they stayed where they were, there were few injuries. As for those disciples with extremely high aptitudes and inner disciples, because they hid in the small grotto heaven first and couldn't retreat in time, they were all annihilated. Suddenly, a long cry came from Big Wing Peak, and the mountain rocks collapsed. Wind and thunder rumbled. A moment later, a gigantic shadow that covered the sky flew out and swayed. With a flash, it flew into the sky and disappeared. After doing this, Shaolin Yun's confidence grew. With the help of the sect leader's seal, the spirit rock was now connected to his mind, and he could see everything it saw. He only needed to send an order in his mind, and he could command it to attack strong enemies for him. He took out a few pills from his sleeves and swallowed them. Although he didn't use much magic power just now, it was better to maintain his battle power at its peak. After adjusting his breath, he first tried to order the spirit rock to rush out of the heavens to see if there were any loopholes. But just now, after passing through the 8th layer of high cloud, he found that he had actually returned to the surface, and was trapped in a lake. Only then did he give up on that idea. The spirit rock just flapped its wings, and the entire lake was swept into the sky by a hurricane. Before the nascent soul cultivators looked over, it had already flapped its wings and flew away. This spirit rock's speed was like a shadow, and it was said that it could travel all over the 9 continents with a flap of its wings. Although it wasn't really that fast, it was far better than normal escape techniques. After circling around the chaotic world space a few times, Shaolin Yun also roughly figured out the way. Just as he wanted to summon it to his side, he saw 3 sword lights suddenly appear in the sky. They were like bolts of lightning, charging towards the spirit rock. Shaolin Yun was shocked. Shaoqing Supreme Sword. Among the Shaoqing cultivators, he didn't want to meet the extreme sword lineage cultivators the most. Even if the spirit rock could win in a head-on battle, as long as they escaped, they might not be able to catch up. However, the other party was already tangling with him. Even if he escaped, he might not be able to get rid of them. He could only choose to fight. However, at this moment, something interrupted him. At this moment, there was actually a wisp of aura that was extremely close to where he was hiding. This was a huge matter that concerned his safety. He could not be bothered to control the spirit rock anymore. He let go of his restraints and let it deal with it on its own. Then, he retracted his consciousness and observed carefully for a while. He could not help but sneer. I was wondering who it was. So it's that rebellious disciple. You're unlucky to have met me. He stood up and waved his sleeves, coming out of his hiding place. Outside the cliff, Tao Jinren stood on a huge rock. He held a scroll in his hand. It was the origin class and walking beast diagram. Seeing a streak of light coming over from the sky, he raised his head to look. After Xiao Yun came closer, he was rather surprised to see his calm expression. He said, "Why? You seem to know that I'm here." "I'm here to look for Sect Master Xiao." Tao Jinren shook the walking beast diagram and took out a small beast's soul. He said, "Just a small technique. I'm afraid it won't enter Sect Master Xiao's eyes." Xiao Lingyun came to a realization. So it's the air-eating dace. However, this beast needs to find a cultivator's aura. You don't have such a method. If I'm not wrong, it was left by your master, right? Tao Jinren bowed and said, "Today, I found Sect Master Xiao to help my master settle the karma of the past." He was able to find this place so smoothly not only because of the air-eating dace, but also because of the help of the Hui Dragon's soul. This sky demon could transform into thousands of clones. With it leading the way, and Xiao Lingyun hiding in one place for a long time without moving, it gave him a chance. Xiao Lingyun scoffed and said, "It must have been hard for you and your master to spend so much effort. However, I've seen many of your methods before. You being able to find a sky demon's soul is indeed your ability. However, if you want to win me with just this, aren't you overestimating yourself? If your master was here, you might have a chance of winning." Tao Jinren said indifferently, "Whether it is or not, we'll only know after we fight." As the sect master of a sect, it was impossible for him to find trouble with him normally. However, with Yu Zhao's profound technique, he had a chance. At this moment, there was no mountain guarding spirit rock by his side to protect him, and no one from the same sect to help him. He could be said to be all alone. Xiao Lingyun glanced at the source diagram and beast diagram and sneered, "How many abilities did your master teach you?" He raised his hand and took out the South Flower Master Imperial Spirit Birds chart. He wiped his hand on the first rank of Strange Ho. In an instant, a featherless strange bird with 6 legs and 4 wings leaped out. Its 2 eyes were tightly shut, and its eyelids kept moving, but it seemed to be unable to open them. The battle between 2 South Flower sect cultivators was to see who possessed stronger mutated beasts and spirit birds. As the sect master of South Flower sect, Xiao Lingyun possessed all 5 grades of spirit birds in the spirit bird chart, and he even possessed more than 1 heavenly demon soul essence. All of these were inherited from Black Turing Palace, but he had kept it a secret in the past. This was also the reason why he was confident. Tao Jinren's expression slightly froze. He recognized that the strange bird was called Guanyi. It did not have much combat power, but once it opened its eyes, it could immediately capture the souls of living beings. Even if he was a Grotto Heaven cultivator and could not capture it for a while, there was an enemy beside him. As long as he made a mistake, he would lose the battle. However, if he released the beasts to fight, he would only be using his weakness to attack the enemy's strength. Fortunately, his cultivation method did not come from the same sect. He made a hand seal, and a large yellow hand immediately formed above his head. It stretched out and grabbed downwards. Xiao Lingyun sneered and used his mana to point at it. A green light flashed and instantly dispersed the large hand. But all of a sudden, a monster with bright feathers and a flat body that looked like a kite barged in. It lay on the night watcher bird, and in just a moment, it swallowed the soul essence into its body. When Xiao Lingyun saw it, he was shocked. He recognized the appearance of this demon. It was clearly the one that Zhang Yan had released during the battle in the northern underworld continent. His heart was filled with fear, and he hurriedly used his spiritual power to sense his surroundings. This monster was intercepted by Zhang Yan when he saw that Li and Mi had died in battle. Tao Xinren could not handle it alone in the South Sea, so he temporarily came to the South Sea to listen to his orders. After eating the guanyi bird, it tasted delicious. It circled in the air and rushed down again. Spiritual Master Tao took advantage of Xiao Lingyun's unsteady state of mind to summon the fine prisoner pot and sent out a command. Suddenly, there was a flash of spiritual light and 8 white Jiao dragons leaped out from the pot. He pointed to the front and they all rushed towards where he was. Xiao Lingyun felt all kinds of chaotic aura from the intercepted monster. He really did not know what to use against it. He was also afraid that Zhang Yan was close to him, so he suddenly had the idea of retreating. His body shook, and with a rumble, he revealed his dharma. He saw a red-backed phoenix spread its wings and floated in the air. It had a spirit cloud crown on its head, and a pair of pearls hung down from its chin. It swung its long tail, and a colorful light appeared as it leaped out of the encirclement of the white water dragons. On the other side, after staring at Jinren Kangzheng for more than an hour, Zhang Yan had more or less deduced how to walk in the void realm. However, he also realized that the chaotic void realm was not unchanging. It seemed to be slowly changing. There might be a deeper layer of change. But now that chaos was everywhere, he could not wait any longer. After thinking for a while, he used his mana and the devil treasury leaped into the void. After a few hundred leaps, it finally arrived at the original location of the North Nether continent. As soon as he arrived, he suddenly felt a vast spiritual vigor rushing up. A consciousness connected with his body, and then the entire sea surface suddenly surged. Chapter 1195. Zhang Yan calmed himself down and raised his head to look. He saw raging waves rolling in front of him and a half-snake half-tortoise emerged from the seawater. It was unknown how big its body was, but it had a thick back and was as tall as a platform. There was a long snake coiled around its body and its scales were wrapped around its heavy armor. It hissed and raised its head to devour. He instantly understood that this was a natural spirit. It had the chi of heaven and earth and the power of the stars. It transformed into a divine fetus and was born from the calamity. With his help, it was able to appear in the world. He couldn't help but laugh. He shook his sleeves and came out of the demon treasury. He floated up and stepped on its back. He turned his head and saw the tribulation fire floating over. This time, he didn't dodge. The tribulation fire leaped and was about to reach him when the black tortoise raised its head and let out a roar. The fire seemed to be swept by a strong wind and after a few flashes, it suddenly disappeared. Zhang Yan frowned slightly. He could sense that the tribulation fire hadn't been extinguished. It was just temporarily suppressed by the collision of the black tortoise divine chi. If he let his guard down for even a moment, it would probably resurface again. He thought about it. The tribulation fire could be used by the other party. If he didn't get rid of it, there would be endless trouble. He might have to borrow the strength of this divine beast. Thus, he sat cross-legged and communicated with it with his mind to find a solution. This black tortoise was the god of the north. It didn't care about life or death. However, it appeared because of him. Their fates were linked together. If he was defeated and died, he would definitely disappear. Now that it was questioned, it immediately responded. It released a strand of majestic divine intent to wear down the source of the tribulation fire. Even though Zhang Yan didn't need to make a move, he couldn't leave now. Once he, the main character, went somewhere else, the fire would jump out again. Thus, he calmed his mind and sat still. The moment the divine beast black tortoise appeared, heaven and earth shook. Spiritual energy surged and everyone felt it. However, most people didn't know what happened due to their cultivation. Only a few people had the ability to examine it. Jinren Kangzheng looked over and saw that the place where the North Nether continent used to be had turned into a huge void hole, sucking in the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth. Apart from that, he couldn't see anything else. Yuanshi Jinren asked, Shixiang, how is it? Did something happen? Jinren Kangjing pondered for a moment, then said, from brother's point of view, perhaps the egg that Zhang Yan left in the north borrowed spiritual opportunity. It was born. Yuanshi Jinren's expression tightened as he asked, what is that? Jinren Kangjing muttered, that thing seems to be able to conceal one's qi dynamic, it's hard to observe. He flung his sleeves and said, don't bother with it. Even if it's a little mysterious, it has to follow my will in the land of shattered space. Yuanshi Jinren nodded and said, senior brother is right. Jinren Kangjing looked at the sky and said, this Xian technique has fallen for 6 hours, right? Yuanshi Jinren immediately said, yes, it's neither early nor late. It's exactly 6 hours. Jinren Kangjing's eyes flashed and he said, according to master's arrangement, victory is here. Yuanshi Jinren was shocked and asked, master's arrangement? What is master waiting for? Reverend Kangjing smiled and said, at first glance, Reverend's profound technique seems to only create chaos in the world, but there are actually other changes within it. At first, it's hard to see, but after 6 hours, it will circulate like our sect's vast star sky steps. Yuanshi Jinren was stunned at first, then his thoughts spun quickly. His face gradually revealed joy and he said, if that's the case, it'll be like a smooth journey for us to cross the world. Vast star sky steps was a cultivation technique. It was also a form of formation footwork. When a cultivator took a step forward, he had to repeatedly cross thousands of formation gates, and use the formation energy to sense the stars in the sky to refine his qi. Almost every true disciple of Jade Firmament was extremely familiar with this. If that's the case, then they can really walk around here and come in and out as they please. He sighed again and said, it's a pity that we only know the position of the stars. The disciples are scattered everywhere and can't gather their strength to attack the enemy. Otherwise, this battle would be much easier. Reverend Kangjing gave a deep smile, raised his sleeve, and took out a jade token. He removed the restriction on it and said, what do you think this is? Yuanshi Jinren took a look and was shocked, spirit tablet? This tablet has a bit of Yuxiao's soul in it. No matter where the tablet is, the original owner will be able to sense it. He thought for a while and said excitedly, this is a great method. This way, no matter where we go, our fellow disciples will be able to sense it. However, there's a drawback here. Once the spirit tablet is damaged, if they die in battle, then their souls will really scatter and they can't even reincarnate. However, they are in the tribulation now. If they lose this battle, they won't have such a chance, so there's no need to think about this anymore. The two of them stood there for 2 minutes. Suddenly, there's a flash of light and a Taoist in his 30s with thick black hair and beard walked over. It's Hall Master Su Heng of Yuxiao School, Zhou Xianyang. He came forward and bowed, greetings to the two Zenrens. Jinren Kangjing nodded and said, you've arrived first. 3 people is enough. There's no need to ask too much, just follow me. He walked in the familiar formation and headed towards the closest qi dynamic. Not long after, he arrived above a swamp. A graceful lady stood in the sky. She curtsied and said, I'm here to greet the 3 Zenrens. Hall Master Su Heng said, it's Yuanying Sect's Jinren Wei. Jinren Yuanshi glanced at Jinren Kangjing. When he saw the latter nod, he said loudly, Jinren Wei, we're allies, so why don't we travel together? Jinren Wei hesitated for a moment, but he still curtsied and said, then I'll have to trouble you. Jinren Kangjing didn't say much to her and walked towards another qi dynamic. Jinren Wei's eyes flickered when he saw the 3 of them passing through the boundary without any hesitation, as if they had walked 1,000 times before. Not long after, the 4 of them stepped into another boundary and bumped into a young cultivator with an elegant air. Jinren Kangjing took a step forward and bowed. Jinren Shao, it's been a long time. The Taoist on the other side was Qinsang School's Dongtian master, Shao Rongyu. He glanced at the 4 of them and frowned before returning the greeting. Right at that moment, he felt an unusual movement in the distance. He turned around and saw two people there. One of them was Hall Master Zhou Yong of Yuxiao, and the other was Peak Master Wu Yunqing of Zhengxing. Xiao Rongyu's expression was stern. With his skills and the treasures he had, he could retreat even if he couldn't win against Kang Zheng. But at this moment, the six of them were here, so it was impossible for him to escape. At this point, he also abandoned the thought of survival, and with a loud shout, he circulated his Fa Li, and in a split second, the tide of water surged forward. Jinren Kangjing said coldly, "Kill him." The next moment, the six of them attacked at the same time. On top of a mountain, Meng Zhen was setting up a formation token to calculate the theory of this boundary space. At that moment, he stopped and looked up. Jinren Zhao's aura was originally in that direction, but it suddenly disappeared. He was silent for a moment and sighed. He continued to calculate. At that moment, Jinren Kangjeng and the others went to the next boundary after killing Jinren Xiao. Because more than 4 people would be separated and chased to other places, Zhou Yong and Wu Yunqing were not in the formation this time. However, they knew the changes of the star positions. As long as they felt the location of the soul, they would be able to find it again in a short time. About an hour later, the 4 of them bumped into a Daoist in green. This person was about 30 years old, and he looked like a cool breeze and bright moon. He was extraordinary. Everyone recognized that this was Shaoqing sect's Dongtian master, Cao Shao. Seeing that the 4 of them came together, he did not bother to greet them. He swung his sleeves, and thousands of sword lights shot up and slashed at them. However, before they reached him, he suddenly retracted the sword lights and leaped into the air to escape. He saw dozens of star thunders exploding where he originally stood. When he looked over, he saw a beautiful female cultivator. He recognized her as the Yuxiao Hall master of the Xinming Hall, Zhou Ruying, who often went out. He changed his mind and looked up to ask, "It's not a coincidence that 4 people from your sect came here. Do you know the trick to travel here?" Jinren Kangjing said, "I can't hide it from you, fellow Daoist Chao." Cao Shao nodded and said, "To be able to fight with several Yuxiao fellow Daoists, even if I die, I'll be happy." Jinren Kangjing said, "Fellow Daoist has the sword escape technique. If you leave now, we might not be able to stop you." Cao Shao sneered and said, "If I leave, I'm afraid all of you will go elsewhere to find opponents. Instead of having your fellow Daoists in trouble, why don't I bear the burden?" As he said that, he flicked his sword light, and a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. "Moreover, I've cultivated the sword for more than 2,000 years, and I'm quite lonely. I'm looking for a fellow Daoist to go with me." Jinren Kangjing shook his head and said, "Let's do it." Yu Xiao's technique came from the same source. Now that they were activated together, the sky was instantly filled with starlight, and the sound was loud and powerful. Cao Shao, however, was not afraid at all. A spot of sword light appeared, and it instantly turned into thousands of sword lights. He fought with the 5 of them alone. For a moment, the star fire and sword lights collided with each other, and the sky was filled with deafening whistling sounds. After fighting with them for half a minute, Cao Shao felt that he could not hold on anymore. He fought against so many people alone, and the reason why he could last until now was because he did not hesitate to use his mana to use all kinds of divine arts. He was very clear that if he continued to fight, he would not be able to last more than 100 breaths, so he did not delay any longer. With one thought, he gathered all of his spirit mana into one spot, and the sword light instantly turned into one, charging towards Jinren Yuanshi. When Jinren Yuanshi saw his sword light coming, he had a feeling that there was nowhere to hide, but he humphed and actually took the slash head-on. After Cao Shao used this sword, all of his mana was exhausted, and his sword pellet also fell to the ground. Seeing that his opponent was fine, he could not help but be surprised, and asked, "The crossing of the stars?" Jinren Kangjing said, "Yes." The crossing of the stars was one of Yu Xiao's 16 techniques. If it was difficult for a fellow disciple to avoid the enemy's attack, he could use his own body to take the hit. However, he was a nascent body cultivator, so he could use a clone to replace it. However, this sword had its own mystery, and that clone of his was really killed. Originally, he could summon 6 clones, but in the future, he could only summon 5. Qiao Xiao smiled, as if he did not mind not being able to kill his opponent. He only sighed and said, "In the past, I have only heard of this technique, and today, I have finally seen it for myself." Jinren Kangzheng said calmly, "Losing one of my clones, Jinren Chao can rest in peace." He flicked his finger, and a starlight flew out. Following a rumble, everything in front of him was razed to the ground. Chapter 1196. On the clear jade spirit cliff of Jade Heaven Sect, a young Taoist with delicate features opened his eyes. 2 streams of clear air flashed behind him before disappearing. He muttered, "This divine art was completed in a hurry, so there are flaws in it. But now that the time is pressing, I have no choice but to do so." He stood up and stood at the edge of the cliff. With his hands behind his back, he looked down at the 9 continents. Just now, he had relied on the Xian technique passed down by the patriarch to catch the other party off guard and move the water of the 4 seas to outer space. However, this was only a slight delay. As the Xian technique weakened, it would eventually return. After all, Qinsang School was the first to start the tribulation of man. They were well prepared. If there were no follow-up methods, it would not take long for them to turn the situation around. Since it has already been launched according to plan, the attack should be like a thunderstorm. There will be no rest. I will not give them any chance to breathe or counterattack. But before that, I need to get rid of a variable. With a thought, he looked in a direction. Zhang Yan was sitting cross-legged on the black tortoise's body, using its power to wear down the tribulation fire. He could feel that under the majestic spirit of this divine beast, the fire was weakening bit by bit. Now, there was only a little left. Just as he was about to completely erase it and free himself, suddenly, an unprecedented sense of danger rose in his heart. Without any hesitation, his consciousness moved. The protective talisman given by sect leader Qin flew out and blocked in front of him. The heaven and earth seemed to have suddenly slowed down. In his eyes, a young Taoist in a fluttering robe could be seen crossing the sky from thousands of miles away. Then, he pointed his finger. Ping! Like glass shattering, the talisman shattered at the command of a finger. The person seemed to be injured as well. His figure faded, but his momentum did not change. Although Zhang Yan saw all of this, he was unable to move his body. He understood in his heart that this was happening. If he was hit by this finger, his spirit would definitely disappear. And for the other party to be able to come in front of him, he thought that the 2 sect leaders must have been held back by him. He could clearly feel that the black tortoise was using all his strength to subdue the tribulation fire and could not free himself for a while. At this moment, the only one who could save him was himself. Thus, in that instant, he did 2 things. One was to order the black tortoise not to worry about him. One used all his strength to subdue the tribulation fire, while the other called for someone to save him. The young Taoist saw that he was about to succeed. Suddenly, a bolt of heavenly fire descended from the 9 heavens and landed on his body. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and look beyond the sky. Jingsang. However, even though he was bathed in flames and his body was constantly dissipating, that finger was still moving unwaveringly towards the space between Zhang Yan's brows. However, with this obstruction, his momentum was inevitably slowed down. Just as the tip of his finger was about to touch the forehead, the tribulation fire was finally suppressed to nothingness. At the same time, Zhang Yan's divine will connected with the black tortoise. His eyes flashed, and with a loud bang, his entire body exploded. The young Taoist let out a cry of surprise. Zhang Yan was not injured by him, but he had dispersed himself first. His physical body was here, but he was able to do this. He couldn't help but be surprised. At that moment, the black tortoise roared in anger. Its divine will swept over like a tidal wave. The young Taoist looked deeply at him, and in the end, the remnant of his body was finally destroyed. After a few breaths, Zhang Yan's body gathered together once more. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he looked towards Nan Tian. Master Lingya. Even though he had read many records, he didn't think that the true power of a mortal cultivator was far greater than what he had imagined. If not for the fact that his body of strength could split and combine, he would have had the help of the Black Tortoise's divine will. In addition, Patriarch Jingtsang and the sect leader had given him a talisman to delay him for a moment. Just now, that attack had already killed him. He laughed coldly. He would remember this debt. If he had the chance, he would definitely get his revenge. The other party had not succeeded this time, so he was already on guard. With the protection of the Black Tortoise, he wouldn't have another chance next time. Now that the tribulation fire was gone, he was no longer restricted. He was about to charge into the sky of the broken world, but under his command, the Black Tortoise didn't move. Just now, at the critical moment, he had proactively sunk into the god beast's divine will and borrowed its power. Just now, he was able to move his body. In order to prevent Master Lingya from coming back, he still hadn't retreated. Just a little investigation revealed the reason. He saw that the Black Tortoise's body was covered by a bright light. He didn't know what it was, but although it couldn't harm the god beast at all, it was locked in place. He frowned slightly. This was Master Lingya's method. Although the light only restricted the god beast, he could still move freely. However, if he left the Black Tortoise's protection, it was hard to guarantee that the other party wouldn't attack again. Such a powerful enemy wasn't something he could deal with right now. He couldn't help but think, I wonder how the two sect masters are doing. Whether it was in terms of status or ability to fight, he could be considered an extremely important part of the Qinsang school. He understood that if the two sect masters could help him just now, they definitely wouldn't stand by and do nothing. Something must have happened. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he suddenly felt two enormous divine wills descend upon him. In the next moment, he felt as if he had fallen into a mysterious place. He saw two Taoists standing before him. They were Yu Xianshao and sect leader Qin. He suddenly realized that the two sect masters had used a strand of their divine wills to illuminate this place. Their true bodies and Dharma bodies were still in their respective sections. Just now, because he was mixed with the Black Tortoise's divine will, he was accepted into this place. Using divine will to communicate, even if he said thousands of words, it would only take a moment for the outside world to pass. Sect Master Qin looked over and said, "Fortunately, Hall Master Du Zhen is safe and sound." Yu Xianshao said, "In order to get rid of you, Venerable Lingya deliberately planned and didn't hesitate to expose his own methods. Originally, we each had a method to save you, but if we acted hastily, we might not be able to guarantee that there wouldn't be any unforeseen events. This time, it's for the best that you can avoid it." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Fortunately, I have the Black Tortoise's protection and the talisman that Sect Master gave me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to avoid this disaster." Sect Master Qin nodded and said, "The appearance of a divine beast is indeed a big change. No wonder Lingya is so anxious." Zhang Yan said, "However, now that the Black Tortoise is blocked by the external light, do you have a way to get rid of it, Sect Master?" Sect Master Qin examined it for a while and immediately understood the reason. He said, "This is the treasure that Sect Master Yuxiao has, it's called the Divine Light of Beauty. Anything that is illuminated by it can be stopped, but outsiders can't hurt it either. I think he knows that both of us are on guard, so it's difficult for it to fall on us, so he used it on the Black Tortoise. To get rid of this light, we need a metamorphosis mortal cultivator to cast a spell. However, Lingya has already moved, so he won't give me such a chance." Zhang Yan asked, "May I know how long it will take?" Yu Xianshao said, "If no one disturbs it, it will be dispelled in 2 to 4 hours." Zhang Yan nodded, but he knew in his heart that although it didn't seem long, it was hard to guarantee that Lingya still had this thing in his hands, so he couldn't count on it too much. At this moment, Yu Xianshao said, "Just now, 2 of Lingya's clones came out at the same time. Even though they've been eliminated, 2 more will come after a breath of time. We need to see what's going on." After he finished speaking, he pointed with a finger, and a ray of light instantly split open in the field. It seemed like a bright sword light flashed, and it carried the divine wills of the three of them to penetrate all the concealing haze and see the truth. In an instant, they knew the ins and outs of this technique. The technique that Lingye used was called the Three Glorious Stars, and it could split one's body into three. Each body had 70 to 80% of the original strength. What was even more amazing was that unless these three bodies were killed at the same time, as long as one of the bodies remained, the other two could be split again. This profound technique had extremely high requirements. It required a disciple of the direct bloodline to cultivate one of the four Qis and two techniques of Yuxiao school, the Glorious Star Divine Seeking Technique, and to absorb the karmic luck of others. If this disciple was able to cultivate to the heavenly abode in one go, then the person in charge of the technique would be able to kill the disciple, and then the disciple would be able to be sent to be reincarnated once more. In this way, after 3 reincarnations, the disciple would be able to create 3 clones in one go in the end. However, the temperament of the disciple in every reincarnation was different. Not to mention whether or not the disciple could attain the heavenly abode, even the person with great karmic luck wasn't easy to find. During this period, the person in charge of the technique could only let nature take its course and couldn't interfere with any external forces. Thus, it was extremely difficult to accomplish this technique. Yu Xianshao pondered for a moment and said, "No, just now, if Lingye's 3 clones were to appear at the same time, coupled with Liang Xuani, then not to mention Taoist Zhang being unable to escape calamity just now, even the 2 of us would be suppressed by him. There must be a reason for this." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly, and he said, "Master Lingye obviously wasn't able to accomplish it completely." Yu Xianshao said in surprise, "How can Taoist Zhang be so sure?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Before I entered the Tao as a mortal, I was engaged to a daughter from the Zhou family of Dingyang. Later on, I received guidance from someone and found out that this girl was under Lingye's tutelage. She wanted to borrow my karmic luck to cultivate, so she went up the mountain and became a disciple of Qinsong." Yu Xuanxiao's eyes shone as he sized him up seriously. Then, he nodded and said, "No wonder Lingye insisted on killing you." He thought about it again and raised his eyes to say, "In this case, Lingye's 3 clones were not completed. This is an oversight. I wonder if we can make use of it." Sect leader Qin said, "Whether we can or not, you can ask." As soon as he finished speaking, a talisman appeared in front of him. This was left behind by Jinren Yuling, and it was also formed by a strand of his divine will. It contained a mysterious technique called knowing and not knowing. Using this technique, one could ask Jinren Yuling a question. As long as the answer was not outside of heaven and earth and it was something that Jinren Yuling did not intentionally obstruct, the answer would be given. Qin Zhangmen pointed with his finger and immediately asked with his divine will. He knew the result immediately. He pondered for a moment and then said, "Lingye Shangren's 3rd clone is residing in his body. Because it is not complete, it is unable to move, it is indeed a big flaw. Just killing this body alone is useless. Later, I can use the mountain and mountain seal as a vessel and use the mysterious technique to move his other 2 clones into a space in the void. Then, I will send someone to the mountain gate of Yuxiao and kill him. Then, I will attack at the same time. In this way, this technique can be broken." Yu Xianshao thought for a while and said, "If I make a move, Liang Xuani will definitely stop me. This matter can only be handled by our 2 sections. However, Lingye must have made some arrangements. He will not sit still and wait for death. The outcome of this move is hard to predict." Sect leader Qin said, "I can give you the treasure of the sect and send a capable disciple to go." At this moment, Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Sect leader Jinren, this person and I have karma. This time, I might as well go and settle it." Chapter 1197. Hearing Zhang Yan's request, sect leader Qin thought for a while and said, "Lingye's 3 bodies have not been completed. Not only can he not move his last body, but he can only reach the grotto heaven realm at most. Hall Master Duzhen can go there." Zhang Yan dared to say this not because he was arrogant, but because of this reason. If Lingya still had his mortal metamorphosis cultivation, even if they were thousands of miles apart, he could still attack the two sect leaders with spells and divine powers. Even if he couldn't fly, he wouldn't be much weaker. The only thing he had to worry about was that even if Lingya had a flaw, he would find a way to make up for it. Maybe he would order the cultivators of the sect to intercept him on the way. It was more likely that he would set up a mortal metamorphosis cultivation method on the Clear Spirit Jade Cliff. Sect leader Qin said, "When you return to your body, I will give you the sect's treasure. However, you can't use it with your cultivation. I will attach my divine will to it. As long as you can bring it to Lingya, you can use it." Yu Xianshao said, "Lingya has a lot of Dingxiu divine lights. If he can stop the black tortoise, he can also stop you. I have several tribulation-avoiding sword lights here. I will give you 3 of them. If they come, they can help you avoid 3 times." Sect leader Qin said, "There will be many obstacles on the way. Hall Master Du Zhen, you have to be careful." Zhang Yan acknowledged. After a moment of consideration, he asked, "May I ask, how long can Sect Master hold off Venerable Lingya's people?" Sect leader Qin said with a smile, "You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be greedy. This is a stable trip. Since I have prepared for this tribulation for so long, I naturally have some methods to trap him." Zhang Yan nodded. From sect leader Qin's words, he didn't want to fight head-on. Instead, he wanted to find a way to trap him. This was probably to reduce the consumption of his magic power so that it wouldn't affect his future ascension. If that was the case, he might be able to do one thing. After thinking for a while, he bowed and said, "Sect leader spiritual master. Fast updates, refreshing website with few advertisements. I like this kind of website the most. You must give me a good review. I have a request." "Is it possible?" Sect leader Qin said, "Hall Master Du Zhen, please speak." Zhang Yan said, "Sect leader, please allow me to act as I please." Sect leader Qin did not hesitate at all. He immediately nodded and said, "I approve of this matter. Hall Master Du Zhen can do whatever you want." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, sect leader." Yu Xianshao said, "Daoist Zhang, since you're going on this trip, why don't you go? There are some things that I need to tell you." Sect leader Qin also said, "Hall Master Du Zhen, please listen carefully. Dealing with Lingya was not a simple matter. After all, he was a mortal metamorphosis cultivator. Even if his cultivation was lacking, he still could not be underestimated. Some of his methods were even more difficult to guard against. This wasn't something a heavenly passage cultivator could know, so he had to explain it in detail. Zhang Yan listened to the guidance of the 2 sect leaders for a long time. If there was something he did not understand, he would ask a few questions from time to time. When he had a plan in mind, he bowed with a Dao salute and retreated his divine will from that place. After he left, Yu Xianshao said, "Perfected Zhang, you have a plan for this trip. However, you and I still have to prepare for the worst." Sect leader Qin smiled and said, "Hall Master Du Zhen, there are very few mistakes. There are very few mistakes. If it really comes to that, then according to our previous plan, the 2 of us will give up our bodies to help our disciples." Yu Xianshao nodded solemnly. The 2 of them had naturally prepared many backup plans for the mortal tribulation. One of the methods was to use Mooli to drag exalted Lingya and Liang Xuani into the void realm. Even mortal cultivators would not die if they fell into it. In the future, it might be 1,000 years before they could return to the present world. If they were unlucky, they would be trapped here forever. They could not transcend. In the 2 sects, Meng Zhida and Ning Chuanqiu both had the potential to ascend. If they won this battle, as long as one of them survived, they could continue cultivating with the earth qi that they had absorbed. There was still a chance of breaking through the realm and bringing everyone to the other realm. Of course, this was the last step, and it was filled with many variables. Unless it was absolutely necessary, they could not use it. After Zhang Yan's divine will returned, he opened his eyes and calculated in his heart. He realized that only a moment had passed in the outside world. At this moment, there was a loud rumbling sound in the sky. He looked up and saw two rays of light, one turbid and one clear, clashing with each other in the west. At the center of the sky, there were also two spiritual opportunities clashing. The one coming from the south had countless starlight surging, like a dazzling Milky Way, sweeping across half of the sky. In the north, there was a turbid Milky Way that had no beginning or end. It was hard to tell who would win. Just as he was observing, he suddenly sensed something and looked towards the north. He saw a beam of spiritual light descending from the heavens, heading towards where he was. It was sect leader Qin's sect-guarding transcendent artifact of Yutsang sect, and that world-chiseling technique could not stop it in the slightest. After talking to the two sect leaders just now, he already knew that although the profound technique could suppress the cultivators of the heavenly passage, it did not obstruct the cultivators of the mortal transformation realm. For example, the technique of moving the feathers to victory could not touch the four sect leaders at all. However, if all the disciples of the Qinsang school died and only the sect leader ascended, it would be meaningless. Following sect leader Qin Zai's instructions, he didn't use his mana to receive it, but used his spirit intent. With a slight guidance, the spiritual light fell straight into his body. After a while, the Qinghong sword ball between his eyebrows suddenly jumped. He looked over and saw 3 sword rays flying towards him. It was the calamity-avoiding sword ray that sect leader Yu had mentioned. He also used his divine will to keep it. With the spell that Yu Xianxiao taught him, he only needed to check it slightly to know how to use it. With this, he could kill Ben Mo at Chiyuya once the battle in the sky was over. At this time, he looked at the 9 continents and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He found that the broken empty realm was now moving in a different way than it was just now. He smiled. The techniques that he had now were not the same as before. At first, he needed to observe Jinren Kangjing's movements to find the way to operate it. Now that he had the help of the Black Tortoise's divine will, he didn't need to do that anymore. He only needed to use his divine will to see all the changes. After a little calculation, he would be able to find the correct path. It was a pity that the Black Tortoise couldn't move. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to care about all this. He could just break through the void and kill his way to Lingya. He used his divine will to observe for 10 breaths. Then, he pinched his fingers and calculated the changes. The Yuxiao school's, Chen Shao Steps of Vast Stars, was originally used by the junior disciples of the Yuxiao school. It wasn't complicated for the cultivators of the heavenly abode. The key was whether or not they could see through the operation of the void in the broken empty realm. As long as they understood it, it wouldn't be difficult for someone who knew a little about formations to calculate the way to enter and exit. He could be considered to be proficient in formations. After a while, he already knew the way. Just as he calmed his mind, he heard a rumbling sound. Looking over, he saw that the sky was suddenly torn apart, with 2 ends falling down. He didn't know how long the crack was, but the river of stars and water fell into it. After a moment of daze, the crack closed with a loud bang. At the same time, he heard Yu Xuanxiao's voice. Spiritual Master Zhang, fellow Qin has dragged 2 of Lingya's incarnations into the broken empty realm. There's no time to lose. You can start now. Zhang Yan took a deep breath and adjusted his aura. Then, he stood up on the back of the black tortoise. Then, he waved his sleeves and tapped his feet. He used the sword escape technique and turned into a ray of light, charging into the broken empty realm. At this time, the Yuxiao cultivators were searching for the whereabouts of the Qinsang cultivators under the lead of Jinren Kangjing. However, the latter had already received the voice transmission from the 2 sect masters. They already knew that the other side could gather several people to attack them. Thus, they became extremely cautious. If they felt that something was wrong, they would retreat. Meanwhile, Jinren Kangjing and the others were also in trouble. The 3 Shaoqing cultivators had already found them. Although the Yuxiao side had the advantage in numbers, they were disturbed from time to time. Their footsteps were slowed down. The three Shaoqing cultivators were not in a hurry. The longer they delayed, the more advantageous it would be for them. As long as the water of the four seas that had been shifted to outer space returned, the other side would not be able to monopolize the advantage anymore. After perfected Yuanzhi forced back another ray of sword light, he looked at it flying far away. He was also helpless. He said, "Senior brother, do we need to use that item?" Jinren Kongjin replied, "Bear with it for a while longer. Hall Master Xinming, Peak Master Qiao Ming, and Peak Master Zhengxing are rushing over here. When they arrive, we'll activate it together. That way, we'll have a higher chance of success." In order to deal with the Shaoqing sword cultivators, they had refined many treasures in the past. The item in their hands was one of them. Once they took it out, as long as there were enough people, they could kill 1 or 2 people. That way, they would not be a threat to them. At that moment, Perfected Wei suddenly received a voice transmission in his heart. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, I've just now Sect Master Liang informed me that a few cultivators from my spirit sect are rushing over here. We might be able to kill all 3 of them later." Jinren Kongjin nodded and said, "If that's the case, that would be for the best." On a certain cliff, Meng Zhen flicked his sleeve and kept all the divination rods in front of him. He had already divined the various changes in this world. To him, there were no longer any obstructions in walking in this place. He sensed for a while and could not help but frown. He discovered that many auras were heading towards one place. There were even 1 or 2 extremely strong auras that were not much weaker than his. After carefully identifying them, he thought, "Look at those 3 sword qis. It should be the 3 Shaoqing cultivators fighting over there. If we don't retreat in time, we'll probably be in danger." However, even if he rushed over now, he would not be able to deal with so many people. He pondered for a while and thought, "I can only find a few people from the same sect and go together to help them." He used his magic power and looked around. After determining where the closest person to him was, he went over to look for him. At that moment, Zhang Yan was constantly traversing through the chaotic shattered spatial realm. Because he was traveling at an extremely fast speed and had no intention of getting entangled with others, he passed through a realm in the blink of an eye. After traveling halfway, a giant figure suddenly flew over in front of him and happened to be on his path. Its wings carried wind and thunder, and its momentum was incomparably shocking. He pressed down on the sword light and looked forward. It was a spirit rock with wings that covered the sky. There was a person standing on its back. It was the sect master of the Nanhua sect, Xiao Lingyun. Xiao Lingyun was not prepared to bump into Zhang Yan here, so he could not help but be startled. But then, he sneered. If it was a few dozen breaths ago, he might have been afraid. But now that he had met up with the spirit rock, he believed that even a nascent soul cultivator would not be able to fight him head-on. It was just the right time to kill him. Chapter 1198. Xiao Lingyun knew that Zhang Yan had 2 killing swords in his hands, and his combat strength was extraordinary. However, as the sect master of a sect, he had many protective Dharma treasures on him. As long as he did not get hit repeatedly, he would be able to survive. Moreover, even if he could not win, he could leave if he wanted to. The spiritual rock spread its wings and instantly escaped. Its flying speed was not inferior to sword escape, and it even surpassed it in some aspects. Just now, even when it was being chased by 3 Shaoqing supreme sword cultivators, it barely avoided them and was not injured at all. The reason why he dared to fight was because of this. As for the other reason, it was not known to outsiders. In his opinion, Zhang Yan had fought many battles, and there were even nascent soul cultivators like Chu Rui. Later on, Zhang Yan was being chased by the tribulation fire. Although he did not know how Zhang Yan managed to escape, no matter how powerful Zhang Yan's Dharma power was, it should not be at its peak. Thus, he could take advantage of it. When Zhang Yan saw this person, he could not help but raise his eyebrows. This time, he had a heavy responsibility and did not have the mood to be entangled with this person. He immediately wanted to end the battle quickly. They were both sect masters, and while Xiaolingyun's cultivation base could not compare to people like Chu Rui, the combat power of Southern Flower Sect's cultivators mostly relied on spirit birds and strange beasts, and they could not be measured purely by their cultivation base. He could tell that the spiritual rock was the sect's guardian spiritual rock. However, he didn't care about other sects, but he knew about Nanhua sect because of Taoist Master Tao. In a battle between cultivators, if one's background was seen through, it would be the same as losing half of the battle. He thought about all the advantages and disadvantages of the spiritual rock. He understood that if he wanted to kill Xiaolingyun, he had to get rid of this bird first. And in this, he only had one chance. As long as Xiaolingyun saw that the situation was bad, he would definitely escape. If he refused to appear after that and instead controlled the spiritual rock to attack, it would be troublesome even though he was not afraid. After thinking about it, his eyes flashed and he'd already made up his mind. Thus, he executed a technique and lightning coiled around his body. With a rumble, he instantly vanished from where he stood. Xiaolingyun knew at a glance. Zhang Yan had escaped into the heavenly passage, and was a little bewildered. This person's heavenly passage actually did not collapse under the profound technique? He then sneered, "Do you think I can't do anything to you just by hiding in the heavenly passage?" The amazing thing about this spiritual rock was that it could grab the void. As long as it followed the aura, it would be able to move. Even the Jade Glaze King Serpent could be captured. Moreover, the Book of Discord was a cultivator's grotto heaven. Cotton Candy then activated it repeatedly, wanting to find it. However, Zhang Yan's heavenly abode was different from other cultivators. It wasn't an inner true heavenly abode that was attached to the heavens and the earth, but a spirit splendor heavenly abode that formed a world of its own. Thus, even though the spirit rock was powerful, it was unable to open the door in a short period of time. Meanwhile, in the Xianyuan Utopia, after Zhang Yan entered, with a shake of his body, he released a prominent young doppelganger. Then, with a point of his finger, another doppelganger appeared. It was different from the previous one, as it was formed from the three treasures phase beads. At the same time, with a flick of his sleeve, different spiritual lights flew into the two doppelgangers. After doing this, he didn't stop at all and immediately escaped from the heavenly passage. Seeing him appear again, Xiaolingyun couldn't help but be startled. But he knew that this opponent wouldn't do such a useless thing, so he was both suspicious and cautious. Zhang Yan didn't care what he was thinking. After he reappeared, he immediately launched an attack. With a thought, two rays of sword light flew out. The clear swan sword light headed straight for Xiaolingyun, while the dark north sword slashed towards the spiritual rock. Xiaolingyun immediately controlled the spiritual rock, wanting to avoid it. But at this moment, he suddenly heard a loud shout. His entire body was shaken, and he almost lost his balance. He couldn't help but let out a groan. Even the spiritual rock was affected. Its soaring figure slowed for a moment, and the two rays of sword light were extremely fast. In just an instant, they had already arrived in front of him. Xiaolingyun was already prepared for this situation. He didn't expect to be able to avoid his opponent's attacks every time, but as long as he wasn't like Chu Rui, who was continuously slashed, he could still defend himself. With a thought, the feather robe on his body suddenly emitted a multicolored jade light. The feather color was dazzling, and it was abnormally dazzling. The great swan sword light descended, but as soon as it came into contact with the light, it was deflected. It couldn't really hurt him, but the multicolored light was also shaved off a bit by the sword light. Almost at the same time, the spirit rock was struck by the North Sea sword as well. When the sword slashed down, there was only a wound that was neither deep nor shallow on its wing. Before even a single drop of blood could flow out, the wound had already grown back. Zhang Yan saw this scene and couldn't help but nod. He had long since heard from Tao Zhenren that the feathers of the sect's spiritual rock had been nourished with various spirit birds and precious medicines by the founder of the sect, and had long since become abnormally tough. Even if the Dark North sword could slash it apart, it obviously wouldn't be easy to heavily injure it under normal circumstances. But how could his method stop there? In a situation where he was unable to kill his opponent in one strike, what he needed was not to injure his opponent, but precisely this moment of delay. He stretched out his hand, and his entire arm instantly transformed into a huge hand that covered the sky, grabbing upwards. This wasn't just the great mysterious Chi 5 Elements hand, it also contained a divine ability of the Path of Strength, so this time it was a combination of strength and strength that had never been used before in front of others. And at the same time, the two clones also stepped out from the cave, the prominent Yang clone, pointing downwards, using a 5 Elements escape technique. At this time, Xiaoling Yun still hadn't completely broken free from the sword light, but he felt as if his body was wrapped in a layer of heavy pressure. Guessing that it was a 5 Elements escape technique, he didn't dare to hesitate, immediately using an unbinding escape technique, breaking free from within. But just now, the man and the rock had broken free, and before they could even circulate their Fa Li, the clone formed by the phase transformation pearl also used a 5 Elements escape technique, and so was once again locked in place. Xiaoling Yun had just broken free from the shackles, and was once again trapped. He was also furious, but he didn't believe that his opponent could use his divine ability endlessly like this. As long as there was a gap, he could command the spirit rock to fly into the air, and thus pull away from the attacking hand, so he used his divine ability again, wanting to break through the obstruction once more. Just as he expected, after using the 5 Elements escape technique once, if he wanted to use it again, he needed to evenly adjust his Fa Li. Moreover, Zhang Yan hadn't reached the nascent embryo realm, the clone formed by him couldn't compare to the main body in all aspects, so it couldn't be used continuously. But the lack of divine ability, he could use other methods to make up for it. The prominent Yang clone only lifted his sleeve, and threw out a beast-foot lantern. Once the lantern reached the outside, it lit up, and as the flame flickered, it illuminated the figure of a woman. With just a slight dance, the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth was instantly locked in place. Xiaoling Yun's body stiffened again. Now that he thought about it, it was very easy to escape, but there were also several ways to deal with it, but they all needed time, and he didn't have time right now. Zhang Yan's huge hand had already reached up and grabbed the spirit rock's feet. This spirit rock wasn't willing to be restrained, it screeched and struggled violently. However, although its feathers were extremely tough, in terms of physical strength, not to mention Zhang Yan, it was far inferior to even a great demon of 5th rank in strength path. Moreover, it was currently being held by the spirit rock, so it couldn't fly at all. Xiaoling Yun immediately had a bad feeling. Although he didn't know what the other party wanted to do, he knew he had to stop it, so he couldn't care about freeing himself. His consciousness moved, and several rays of spiritual light flew out from his body to hit the huge hand. However, when they landed on it, they were like water in the abyss, there was no response at all. At this time, Xian Yang's incarnation and the manifestation doppelganger swayed and split into two sides. Each of them held a technique and a mass of qi appeared above their heads, condensing into a 5 Elements hand. Then, they grabbed down. Seeing this, Xiaoling Yun couldn't help but become slightly flustered. Ever since he became the sect leader, he hadn't fought against cultivators of the same generation. Earlier, he thought he could fight against Zhang Yan by relying on the spirit rock's power, but when they really fought, he found he was restrained everywhere, and the battle situation was gradually deviating from his original plan, sliding in an unpredictable direction. He understood that if he didn't think of a countermeasure, he might really follow in Chu Rui's footsteps. So he shouted and forcefully used his magic power to summon the South Flower Main Imperial Spirit Bird's chart. There were 2 heavenly demon soul essences in this chart. Once released, they couldn't harm the enemy, but they could protect themselves. It was just that the consumption of magic power to control these soul essences was not small, and he had long planned to rely on the spirit rock to fight back and forth to exhaust Zhang Yan's magic power. He never thought of fighting directly, so he didn't use it. However, right at this moment, the clear swan sword light that coiled around him changed, and it actually transformed from countless clear lights into rays of fire. This was the transformation of sword light, merging the true light of fire into the sword. Every strike was like fire passing by, quickly cutting away the multicolored light on his feather robe. he couldn't help but be greatly shocked. Not caring about anything else, he hurriedly used his magic power to stabilize the treasured light, so that he could protect himself. But caring about this meant losing sight of the other. As soon as the spirit bird's chart flew out, there was light floating above it, as if the soul of a strange demon was about to crawl out. At this time, the sword light of the dark north sword turned, the tip of the sword pointing straight at it. The demon instantly felt danger, and its body also stopped. If it was under normal circumstances, under the control of Xiao Lingyun's mind and magic power, no matter what danger there was, it would still rush forward. But at this time, being forced by the sword light, without enough power to urge it, it instinctively didn't want to take the risk, so it retreated. And in just these few short breaths of time, the two clones above had already descended, one on the left and one on the right, respectively grabbing the two wings of the spirit rock. This spirit rock also felt pain, and loudly cried out. Xiao Lingyun paled, hesitating for a moment, then clenched his teeth and activated the protective technique on the sect master's seal. Instantly, spiritual light shone on his body, and there was a burst of fiery light, pushing the sword light away a little. His whole body had already turned into clear light and flew up. At this time, Zhang Yan let out a shout, and the three hands of profound qi exerted force at the same time. In the midst of a rain of blood, the spirit rock was actually forcefully torn apart. Chapter 1199. After Zhang Yan killed the spiritual rock, he shook his sleeves and the water light rushed over. With a splashing sound, it swept up the corpse. Almost all the books that you want to read are here. It is much more stable than normal websites and updates faster. It is all text and there are no advertisements. He raised his head and saw that Xiao Lingyun was already far away with the help of the protective light. In mid-air, a scroll fell down. He grabbed it and saw that it was the Nanhua Main Imperial Spiritual Birds chart. Xiao Lingyun tried to escape, but he only managed to protect himself. He did not manage to bring the spiritual bird chart with him. Although the chart could be summoned by his mind, it was not a talisman for defense or attack. Hence, it was slightly slower. The sword gleam slashed a few times and cut away the spiritual vigor. Then, it was intercepted. Zhang Yan heard from Tao Xinren that other than the sect leader of Nanhua, this spiritual bird's chart was useless in the hands of anyone else. Even if he had the sect leader's seal, he wouldn't recognize it if he didn't walk through the ritual in the ancestral hall. However, there seemed to be the body of the demon locust sealed within. Looking at it now, it would take some effort to unlock the seal. Even if he released it, sect leader Qin wouldn't be around and no one would be able to control it. He sighed and didn't look anymore. He tossed it into his sleeves and kept it. Although Xiao Lingyun escaped with his life, he didn't have the spiritual rock and the spiritual bird's chart. It was the same as breaking his arms and he wouldn't be a threat anymore. He still had things to do and there was no need for him to chase after him. He immediately took out a hand seal and recalled the two clones. After deciding on the path, he continued to fly towards the Mo Chiyu cliff. There were no more twists and turns on this trip. Although he met one or two demon sect cultivators, they all chose to avoid him when they saw his sword light flash past. No one dared to get close to him, so he smoothly arrived at the bottom of the Mo Chi Jade Cliff. This jade cliff stood by the side of the sea. It looked like it was dyed in blood. One side was slanted upwards and the other side was straight. It looked like it was cut by a knife and the top of the cliff pierced through the sky and touched the sky. Clouds and mist swirled around like a vortex, spreading for thousands of miles. 10,000 feet down the cliff. The innumerable expanses of seawater smashed against the walls and cliffs, and the sound of it resounded. It could be said to be magnificent, powerful, and extraordinary. This place was vast, whether it was the sea or the cliff. There were pavilions, temples, houses, and palaces that stretched out endlessly. However, at this moment, many places were in ruins. Broken beams and broken pillars were piled up as tall as mountains, and there were even many collapsed mountains. It could be imagined that this was definitely caused by the profound technique of the heaven-mending pavilion, causing the floating island that was originally suspended in the sky to fall. Although with Zhang Yan's cultivation, with just a thought, he could see the entire 9 continents, but this mountain gate of Yuxiao was usually covered by a big formation, so it was blurry to see. He could only read the general outline, and this was the first time he saw the real scene. There were still many disciples of Yuxiao at the foot of the mountain, and there was no lack of Yuanying elders among them. Suddenly, they saw a mysterious aura hanging in the sky, and they couldn't help but look over. After a few glances, they all felt dizzy, and those with slightly lower cultivation stopped breathing and fell straight to the ground. They didn't know if they were dead or alive. The remaining cultivators were shocked. How could they not know that it was a cultivator from the heavenly passage? They were all instantly terrified. Without the great formation of the mountain gate, the cultivation of the people who came here. With a casual wave of his hand, he could wipe all of them off the face of the earth. However, there were many people who weren't willing to wait for death here. They flew up into the sky and fled with all their might. Most of them were stunned and didn't move because they knew. If the heavenly passage cultivator really wanted to kill them, then it would be useless no matter where they ran. As for the chaos below, Zhang Yan just casually glanced at it. As Hall Master Du Jin of the Qinsang school, he naturally wouldn't deliberately target these people. However, after he came here, he didn't restrain his aura. Those who dared to look directly at him, if their cultivation wasn't good enough, naturally wouldn't be able to endure it. Right at this moment, he suddenly sensed a gaze cast onto him, and it was coming from the cliff. Then, a ray of light rushed down from above. The calamity avoidance sword light on his body didn't wait for a greeting and immediately rushed up. With a slash, the ray of light immediately disappeared without a trace. He knew that this must be the divine light of rest released by Master Lingya. However, after the first ray ended, the second ray of light came from nowhere. Similarly, another tribulation avoiding sword light flew up and dissipated it. The ray of light didn't seem to stop. What followed was a third ray, a fourth ray, and after the third ray of light disappeared, the sword light was used up. However, perhaps it was because the cultivation of Lingya's clone was comparable to Zhang Yan at this moment, but after a few exchanges earlier, Lingya's attacks had already been seen through by Zhang Yan. Thus, he soared up and moved around to dodge on his sword. He heard the 2 sect masters warn him not to use any magic treasures to try to break through it. Otherwise, if their auras touched, it could find the source and still freeze him. However, if he really couldn't avoid it, at most he would escape into the heavenly passage. He didn't believe that it could always circle around outside. After the divine light tried a few times, seeing that it couldn't catch up to him, it turned around and shot north. Zhang Yan looked in the direction it left and thought, as expected, Lingya has quite a few of these things. Fortunately, I didn't do that. He had originally thought that if he waited beside the black tortoise for 2 to 4 hours, the divine light would come to take it, and he would use the calamity avoidance sword light to kill it. However, after thinking about it again, Lingya definitely wouldn't let him pass so easily. Now, it seemed that if he really did that, he would just be wasting time. Since there was nothing else to disturb him, he circled around the Mo Chiyu cliff and used a talisman to probe the scenery around him. After seeing that there was nothing wrong, he soared into the sky and flew to the peak of the jade cliff. After a dozen breaths, the scenery in front of him changed, and he found himself before a mountain path. Looking up, he saw that the jade stairs extended all the way into the clouds. It seemed like there was no end to it. He realized that no matter how he flew, he couldn't go around this place. Apart from turning around and going down, he would return to this place after a few breaths in any direction. He didn't panic. He knew that this was definitely a trick set up by Lingya, and it was used to obstruct him. After thinking for a moment, he stopped before the first step. When he arrived here, he was able to faintly sense that there seemed to be a strand of divine intent enveloping the area ahead. Thus, he executed a technique according to the technique taught to him by the 2 sect masters. After waiting for a short moment, Yu Xuanxiao's voice entered into his ears. Daoist Zhang, this technique is called the Green Mountain Beyond the Mountain. To us, it's the easiest to set up, yet it's the hardest to break. After briefly explaining the effect of this technique, he said, "This technique can only be walked up step by step, and I'll pass down the first barrier to you in a moment." Only now did Zhang Yan know that this mountain path was an evolution of a technique as well, and it similarly relied on the jade cliff. It was very likely that it came from the same source as the profound technique of sky splitting and world chiseling, or perhaps they were one. If a cultivator wanted to arrive at the top of the cliff, then he had to walk according to the path, and so long as he was able to walk for 3 to 5 months, he would be able to arrive at the other side. It's fine if you don't want to, but you have to find a way to break through the barrier. If you can pass through at the fastest speed, then you can reach the top of the cliff in 3 to 4 days. The latter path seemed to be a good one, but just as Yu Xianshao had said, it was not easy to solve that obstacle. It required the cultivator to pour his magic power into the spirit veins of the Taoist path and use a special method to pass through it. If it was correct, then the cultivator would be able to pass through it smoothly. If it was wrong, then the cultivator would not be harmed. However, the cultivator would be teleported away by this technique. They might be teleported to outer space or anywhere in the 9 continents. When the cultivator returned, it would be a completely different story. The cultivator would have to start all over again, and no one knew how long it would take. Because the path of the spirit vein was not the path of a forbidden formation, only the divine intent of a mortal metamorphosis cultivator could see through it. Although he could use the technique to reflect everything he saw to Yu Xianshao from time to time, and then find the path to pass it to him, since Master Lingye dared to set it up like this, it was obvious that he was not afraid of people coming to do so. Thinking about it, it was even possible that he was deliberately using this to wear out Yu Xuanxiao's divine intent. Zhang Yan had all kinds of ideas before, and he was even prepared to be trapped in Master Lingye's grotto heaven. However, he did not expect that there was no killing or fighting here, but he had to face the most troublesome kind. As the saying went, fight without fighting. This technique did not have any offensive ability, but apart from walking on the right path, there was almost no way to deal with it. Unless he found a mortal metamorphosis cultivator or someone who was at the same realm as him to come here, then he didn't need to care about this and could directly kill his way in. Logically speaking, if the black tortoise was by his side, he could do this, but Master Lingye would definitely use a method to eliminate this possibility. Just now, that ray of divine light was heading north, and he believed that it was heading for this divine beast. As for Yu Xianshao, if he could get rid of Liang Xuani, there was no need for him to interfere. However, apart from the above, there was actually another way. When he was hiding in the demonic treasury, he had already thought of this idea. Because there might be such a possibility, he even asked sect leader Qin for permission to act at his discretion. This method was to take advantage of the battle between the two sides. He would kill the people of the Devil's Sect one by one and try to gather enough essence chi to push himself to the 6th cycle of strength path. Naturally, it was impossible to kill all the cultivators of the Devil's Sect, and he didn't have that much time to do so. However, there were still many people on Yu Xiao's side, and they could also be included. If it was not enough, there was still the corpse of the Spirit Rock, and the remains of the jade-glazed king snake in the East Sea. If it was not enough, there was still the body of the ancient sky demon, the sun-swallowing green locust. Just now, he seemed to feel the determination in his heart to succeed. The demonic slip that was entrenched in his acupoint let out a loud and clear cry, as if it was abnormally excited. He smiled faintly and comforted the demonic slip. Then, his gaze became deep. He knew that he didn't have much time left. It would be best to finish this matter in a few days. This might be a little hasty, but it was better than wasting time here. Who knew if there would be other obstacles after crossing this mountain path? On the other hand, if he could reach the 6th cycle, he would have a lot more choices. Even if he didn't kill his way to the Mo Chiyu cliff, he could still attack Liang Xuani together with Yu Xianshao. After thinking about it like this, he made up his mind. He looked at the stairs and thought to himself, why should I walk the path that you set up? What I want to do today is my own Tao. With a thought, he went down the mountain without looking back and flew toward the place where the demonic chi was the strongest. Chapter 1200. Before Zhang Yan reached the place he wanted to go, he sensed a ball of turbid spiritual vigor on the way. If it was a Xianmen cultivator, it would not look like this. Moreover, the aura was mixed, indicating that the person's cultivation level had reached a very high level. Even if he had not cultivated the nascent embryo, he was not far from it. He was searching for demonic sect cultivators. Since he had bumped into them, there was no reason for him to let them go. He turned around, changed his direction slightly, and flew towards the place where the person was. In a void space, a Taoist with a long face and a wide forehead was traveling. This was Elder Nye Yi of the Shuashua sect. He was also very cautious. Every time he entered a void space, he would first sense the movement around him to see if there was anything unusual. At this moment, the Xianling and Xianling families were almost scattered in all directions. If he was unlucky, it was very possible to bump into a nascent embryo perfected master. Because of this, if he felt something was wrong, he would rather choose to retreat first than to meet the enemy face to face. After passing through another void space, he suddenly felt a warning. He saw a flash of spiritual light not far away, and then it spread outwards. A Taoist in a black robe walked out. Xian Qi was rolling behind him, and there were two sword lights circling around him. Zhang Yan. When Nye Yi saw him, he could not help but be shocked. If there was a Xianmen cultivator that he did not want to meet now, it would be Zhang Yan without a doubt. Now everyone knew that the Qinsang school's hall master Du Zhen was even more ferocious and aggressive than Yan Changxing back then. Let's not talk about what happened in the ancient times, but for tens of thousands of years, there had never been a grotto heaven cultivator like Zhang Yan, who had killed so many of his peers. Even Chu Rui, who was a nascent embryo cultivator, could be killed directly. He felt that he could not be this person's opponent, so at this moment, without thinking, he immediately used the blood transformation escape technique. His body turned into a ray of blood, and he flew into the sky. Zhang Yan's gaze followed. At the same time, he raised his sleeve and used the 5 elements escape technique. He was very clear that when fighting with demonic sect cultivators, the most important thing to guard against was their endless death substitution technique and escape technique. In the 10,000-year battle with the celestial sect of wonders, there was naturally a way for them to survive. Nye Yi's body paused uncontrollably, but the blood transformation escaping technique was one of the 3 great escaping techniques of the Devil's Doctrine after all. At this moment, he did not sit and wait for death. Instead, he took advantage of the situation and transformed into 2 blood souls that dashed in different directions. Whether it was the aura or the spiritual vigor, it was no different from his own. Those who did not know the details would not be able to tell it apart. At this moment, 2 figures that looked exactly like him walked out from behind Zhang Yan. They were the 2 clones of prominent Yang and manifestation. Xian Yang's clone took out the Pi Beast Immortal lamp and tossed it into the sky, immediately capturing the spiritual energy of this region. Even though Nye Yi was once again pinned down, but compared to Xiao Lingyun, his reaction was extremely fast. Immediately a swift light flew out, accurately hitting the celestial lamp. After shaking it off a little, the binding force was reduced by more than half. He just needed to open his eyes slightly and he would be able to break free. However, at this moment, the clear swan sword in the sky flashed, turning into thousands of sword lights that scattered down. Facing a killing sword artifact, he didn't dare to be careless. He had no choice but to summon out a blood cocoon. Strands of it covered his entire body, not leaving a single gap. As for the 2 blood soul clones, he couldn't care about them. Zhang Yan's series of attacks could be said to come one after the other. Although it wasn't intense, he could only struggle to deal with it. Under the slashes of the dense sword light, the 2 clones that weren't protected were instantly broken. However, after it dissipated, it did not disappear. Instead, it turned into 2 extremely vast surging blood clouds. Wherever it came into contact with, the blood clouds would explode. Everywhere they touched, the mountain rocks fell, the grass and trees all rotted. Not only that, but the sword light that had come into contact with it had also become much heavier, as if it was slowly being tainted by it. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. With a thought, the sword light instantly turned into streaks of fire. The blood stains on them melted away, and they returned to their original appearance. Although his transformation into a sword was not as sharp as the killing sword, nor was it as fast and traceless as the limitless sword, but after merging the 5 elements divine light into it, it was able to handle most situations, and there were almost no shortcomings to speak of. In a short moment, Nie Yi was slashed by dozens of sword lights. The blood cocoon on his body was damaged everywhere, but it was like a living thing, continuously wriggling and healing. In the end, it wasn't broken. It was obvious that it was a protective treasure. Zhang Yan didn't care. His intention was to delay his opponent. Since he forced him to stop defending, then his goal had been achieved. With a thought, he scattered the sword light, covering all directions, sealing off all paths of escape for Nie Yi. At this point, he was like a bug that fell into a spider web, unable to escape. He waved his sleeve again, and dozens of ink-colored water droplets flew out. They were the deep pond water. Although Nie Yi trusted the blood cocoon robe, he knew that Zhang Yan's methods weren't simple. He wasn't willing to be hit for no reason, and wanted to dodge. But at this moment, the avatar, that hadn't moved yet immediately took out a 5 elements escape art and trapped his figure. The water droplets fell in an instant, and about 7 or 8 of them hit his body. With a series of booming sounds, the blood cocoon couldn't take the force and burst open. Outside, the Qinghong sword was already waiting. Seeing that the protective item was broken, the sword light from all directions attacked at the same time. Nie Yi was also strong. In the face of such a dangerous situation, he still did not give up resisting, and continuously changed several kinds of supernatural powers and death substitution skills, but under such a siege, he was destined to be defeated. After struggling for a few breaths, he was finally killed by the sword light. Zhang Yan pointed at his glabella. Accompanied by a clear and melodious sound, the 9 subduing devil slip flew out. With a circle, it swept away all of Nie Yi's essence, qi, and spirit. Then, with a soft hum, it returned to his acupoint. He waved his sleeve and released a ray of fire, sweeping away the bloodstains in the area. Then, with a thought, it merged with the sword light and flew into the sky. On the other side, Jinren Kangzheng and the others were still being harassed by the 3 Shaoqing Supreme Sword cultivators. But they knew that they could counterattack once everyone was here, so they kept their composure. The 3 sword lights in the sky spun and stopped at a mountain peak. They were Xuan, Feng Xianzhao, and Ran Xiushu. Feng Xianzhao said, "Elder Xue, this world is vast. The people of Yuxiao are neither advancing nor retreating after arriving here. It's obvious that they're waiting for reinforcements." Elder Xue said, "So what? The more people that come, the fewer enemies our fellow Taoists will encounter elsewhere. The 3 of us will delay so many of them. Isn't this a gain?" Feng Xianzhao nodded in agreement. Ran Xiushu was a junior, and he was lazy. Seeing that the 2 of them didn't question him, he was happy and kept quiet. About a moment later, the 3 of them moved again, and the 3 sword lights attacked one after another. They wanted to use this method to keep the people of Yuxiao from relaxing and keep them in a state of constant vigilance. As the saying went, a prolonged defense was bound to be lost. As time went on, they would naturally reveal their flaws. After fighting for another hour, a clear light appeared in the distance. 3 cultivators walked out. They were Wu Yunqing, Wu Yunbi, and Zhou Ruiying from Yuxiao sect. They were cultivators of Yuxiao after all, so they were familiar with the formation. That was why they arrived before the people of Devil's sect. Reverend Kangzheng took a look and felt that the number of people was sufficient. Moreover, in order to prevent Shaoqing and the other 2 from retreating, he decided not to wait for the evil sect people and moved right away. He transmitted his voice to everyone present and said, "Move." As he spoke, he threw out a stone. There was a 7-colored light on it, and it was like a rainbow that filled the sky. This object was known as the rotating boulder. After being specially refined by the Yuxiao school, the magnetic force within it was more than 100 times stronger. It could immediately freeze the three sword lights for a short moment, and in the next few breaths, they could no longer fly like before. Naturally, this treasure alone could not take down the opponent. If they felt that something was wrong, they would immediately use their supernatural power to escape. Therefore, they still had another treasure. Wu Yunqing reached into his sleeve and took out an item. This was known as the Lock of Surrender, and it was the treasure of the Wu clan. There was no need to use it, but it could freeze the empty realm and prevent people from escaping. These two treasures alone could not deal with the cultivators of the Extreme Sword sect. However, when used together, it was enough to make the Extreme Sword sect lose its greatest advantage. In addition, they had more than twice the number of people, so they had the absolute advantage. If they were lucky, it would not be an extravagant hope to keep all three of them here. Elder Shui and the others felt their bodies freeze, and they immediately used their supernatural power to escape. However, they could not do it. Elder Shui immediately shook his sword light. Not only did he not leave, but he also charged forward and transmitted his voice, "Go, don't let me die in vain." When the other two heard this, they did not hesitate and flew away. Their actions could be said to be very decisive. They all knew that the Yuxiao school had prepared for this moment for a long time. If they stayed, they would only die together. However, if they could escape with their lives, they could return in the future and kill the people who killed Elder Shui one by one. When the people of the Yuxiao school saw this, they immediately wanted to stop them. However, at this moment, there was a flash in front of them, and an incomparably sharp sword light shone in their direction. Almost everyone present could feel the determination to die. They immediately understood that whoever rushed forward at this moment, that sword would definitely be slashed at that person. If they had no way out, they would have to kill their way forward no matter what. However, now that they had firmly gained the upper hand, most people naturally weighed the pros and cons. Elder Shui knew that as long as there was a moment of delay, Ran Xiushu and Feng Xianzhao would be able to get far away, even if their speed was not as fast as before. However, at this moment, one of the people of the Yuxiao school seemed to be slightly unaffected. He rushed out of the formation and used the star-pulling technique on the two of them, immediately holding them back. When Elder Shui saw this person, a look of disdain flashed in his eyes. However, he did not hesitate at all. He gathered all of the magic power and essence in his body and slashed at the person. When he drew his sword, everyone on Yu Zhao's side unleashed their mystiques and Dao techniques, all of which were directed at him. Boom! Almost at the same time that Elder Shui killed the person, he was also engulfed by a wave of starlight. Chapter 1201. In a cave where the Yuxiao sect was located, there was a jade wall. A figure sat in the jade wall. This person was Hall Master Su Heng, Zhou Xianyang. The cultivation technique he cultivated was one of the 4 qi and 2 techniques of Yuxiao school, the stellar illuminating technique. After cultivating this technique, his battle prowess was not considered high, but his true body would be hidden in the mirror wall. Normally, he only needed to transform into a shadow body to go out. Regardless of whether it was his cultivation technique, divine ability, aura, or appearance, they were the same as the true body. They could even be exchanged at any time. However, if he used the shadow body to fight with others, he would need to expend 30% more magic power. Just now, he was instructed by Jinren Kangzheng. If someone from Shaoqing fought with his life on the line, he had to be the one to receive the sword. If they won, the sect would naturally compensate him. Therefore, when Elder Shui slashed with his sword, he took the initiative to activate the shadow body to attack. Now, it seemed that he had successfully killed a Shaoqing elder. Xuan was the person with the highest seniority in the extreme sword lineage. Without him, even if the other two escaped, their threat to them would be greatly reduced. However, if Zhou Xianyang wanted to come out and fight with others again, he needed to condense another shadow in the mirror wall. However, this shadow also needed to be refined with his magic power and essence qi. With his current cultivation technique, he could still condense 3 more. If he used all of them, he could only be trapped in this mirror wall until the end of his life. Even his soul could not be reincarnated. He made up his mind, and after a while, he refined another shadow body. Then, he released it and prepared to meet up with everyone again. However, the shadow body had just taken a step out of the mirror wall when its body suddenly shook. As if it was killed by countless sword lights, it shattered into pieces. Everything happened in a short moment. When he reacted, the shadow body had already disappeared without a trace. Not a single trace was left, as if it had never appeared in the world. Zhou Xianyang's expression changed slightly, but he did not panic. He thought, could it be that Doran's sword is so powerful that he could actually rely on the guidance of Qi to chase me here? After thinking about it again, Elder Shui should be dead. Even if the sword Qi did not disappear, it could not last for long. He just had to wait for a while more. This wait lasted for 2 hours. He began to ponder. Feeling that he had waited long enough, he activated his technique and condensed another clone. However, the moment he stepped out of the mirror wall, the result was exactly the same as the clone just now. Similarly, it collapsed and disintegrated without any warning. His expression instantly turned ugly. At this moment, how could he not see that there was definitely something strange about Elder Shui's sword? At this moment, he didn't dare to release his doppelgangers anymore. If all 3 of them were killed, he would be trapped here forever. No one would be able to save him. Now, he could only wait for the outcome of the battle to be decided outside. Elder Shui's final slash was an extreme sword divine art known as Origin Crossing End. In the Shaoqing sect, he was the only one who managed to do it. The intent of this sword light was to chase after the opponent's true self. If the opponent didn't die, then he wouldn't leave. This was a method of mutual destruction. Thus, when Elder Shui was struck by Yu Xiao and the others, he had already died. It was as if this world had already determined that he had killed his opponent. Therefore, as long as Zhou Xianyang's aura appeared in the world, he would be able to kill his opponent. It was bound to collapse. Although Zhou Xianyang was not truly defeated and killed, Yu Xiao would not be able to receive even the slightest bit of help from him. Looking at the result, it was not much different from death. At this point in time, the Yu Xiao side did not know that Zhou Xianyang could not return to the formation. He was just about to stop Feng Xianzhao and Ran Xiushu from escaping when the 2 of them were affected by the star leading art. As long as he acted in time, there was a high chance that he would be able to stop one of them. However, when Jinren Kangzheng was about to make a move just now, he frowned. He retracted his hand and turned his gaze in another direction. There was a flash of spiritual light, and after a while, a cultivator stepped out on a wave. It was a middle-aged Taoist with an elegant face and a beard. As soon as he appeared, the entire scene was filled with the sound of waves and the sound of the tide, and everyone present felt as if they were in the depths of the ocean. When Feng Xianzhao and Ran Xiushu saw him, they did not turn around to escape. Instead, they held their swords and stopped. Jinren Kangzheng said in a low voice, "Meng Zhen, it was unwise of you to come here. Letting these 2 go and keeping you here is worth it." As soon as he finished speaking, someone said, "Oh. What if we are included?" There was another flash of light. Pingdu Sect's sect master Qi Hengchan and a cultivator from the sect, Wu Wei, walked in. At the same time, a tall Taoist also walked behind Meng Zhen. It was Qinsang School's Taoist Grotto Heaven's enlightened Zhu Zhixing. Just now, due to the urgency of the situation, Meng Zhen could not find too many people. He was not familiar with the cultivators of other sects, and there was a high possibility that they were cultivators of the Devil sect in disguise. Therefore, he could only find people he was familiar with. He found enlightened Zhu himself, but Qi Hengchan and Ran Xiushu bumped into each other halfway, so they came together. Jinren Kangzheng's expression was slightly serious. Although the number of people on the other side was equal, there were 2 nascent soul-perfected masters. If they fought, needless to say, his side would definitely lose. Just as he was thinking about how to retreat, he saw a surge of blood qi from the side. Then, it gathered and formed a fairy-like cultivator with a tall hat. He looked at both sides and smiled. "Fellow Taoist Kangzheng, I wonder if I am late." Jinren Kongjing smiled and cupped his hands. You are not late. Sect Master Fang came at the right time. Fang Shun walked to the side of Yuxiao School and stood still. Feng Xianzhao and Ran Xiushu looked at each other and walked to the side of Qinsang School. The two sides were in a stalemate. At the moment, both sides could be said to be equal in strength. No one could easily suppress the other. Meng Zhen was not in a hurry to fight, because he knew that if he did, only he and Qi Hengchan would be able to survive. Moreover, he could sense that the water of the four seas that had been moved to outer space was about to return. If he could get its help, his divine arts and Taoist techniques would be improved to a higher level, and he would have a greater chance of winning. Yu Xiao's side was also waiting. Compared to Qinsang School, they also had some concerns. But according to what Venerable Wei had said earlier, there were still people from the devil sect rushing over. Since that was the case, if Qinsang did not attack first, they would be happy to drag it out. It would not be too late to attack when they had the upper hand. Somewhere in the void space, there were several devil sect cultivators flying through the skies. Among them was a middle-aged Taoist with a medium build, red lips, and a long beard. He was Jiling Sect's sect master, Fei Yu. There were 3 people beside him. One of them was the sect's cultivator, Guan Yu, and the other 2 were virtual images reflected by the Great Spirit Steel. Jiling Sect was different from other sections. Even without the help of the Origin Mirage Sect's sect master, Xue Dingyuan, they could still control these virtual images. This allowed them to unleash battle prowess that surpassed their peers from other sects by quite a bit. Fei Yu had listened to Liang Xuani's guidance and rushed towards where Yu Xiao's cultivators were. But this was not something that could be done just because he said so. Those who were proficient in formations should have more or less understood how to travel through this place by now. It was just that those who understood the principles behind formations were few and far between. Within the Devil Sect, the ones who understood this the most were the cultivators from Muqing Sect. Fei Yu, on the other hand, did not know much about it. Therefore, he could only try to find clues left behind by his fellow sect members to find his way over. All of a sudden, a jade pendant hanging on his body trembled slightly. He knew that there was definitely a qi activity left behind by his fellow sect members in the vicinity. Sweeping his gaze around, he fixed his eyes on an inconspicuous rocky beach. Reaching out, he grabbed a stream of qi activity and recited a spell silently. Instantly, it turned into a message talisman, and quite a number of words appeared on it. He took a few glances and said, "Just now, when Jinren from the Blood Soul sect passed by here not too long ago. He said that the parasite plate of Jinren Nie from his sect has cracked and he should be dead. He might have been killed by the cultivators from Qinsang School on his way there. He wants us to be careful." Guan Yi's expression froze. The cultivators from the Devil Sect would leave a secret talisman among each other. After the first few people fell, no one was hurt for a long time. Nie Yi's cultivation was not weak and he was only one step away from the 3rd stage. Unexpectedly, he was defeated and killed. He said, "Could it be that Jinren Nie met Jinren Yuantai?" Fei Yu pondered for a while and shook his head. "It's hard to know. Anyway, it's better to be careful." He did not care at all. He had the precious weapon with him. Even if Jinren Yuantai came, he would not be afraid. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard a loud sound from above. He immediately looked up and saw that in the sky, there was qi of Xian surging over. Then, a huge hand that covered the sky stretched out and slapped towards them. Fei Yu was also shocked and said, "Zhang Yan?" Guan Yi also turned pale and said anxiously, "Sect leader, this person's mana is profound. It's not good to fight him head-on. Why don't we retreat?" Fei Yu snorted and said, "We can't retreat. This person dares to do this, he must have a backup plan. How can I fall into his trap? Moreover, I am the leader of a sect, there's no reason for me to retreat without a fight." He had already calmed down and thought, "You came at the right time. I don't believe that I can't defeat you." With a flick of his sleeve, he first released dozens of huge pillars. They landed on the ground, and as he chanted, they slowly rose up and actually blocked the huge hand. However, the pillars made cracking sounds and seemed like they could not hold on for much longer. He did not expect them to be able to block it. They were only used to buy some time. He reached out and took out a flag from his sleeve. The flag was several feet tall. The back was plain and the front was mysterious. After it was taken out, there seemed to be a circular mouth that was wide open. It was empty and bottomless. One could see many figures struggling and flashing within, as if they were eager to jump out. At the back, there was an eye that was cold and emotionless. It was dead silent. This was the ultimate treasure of the Jiling sect, the Infinite Spirit Banner. Not only did it consecrate the spirits of the past generations of ancestors, it even contained the consciousnesses of the corpses of the ancient Western continent cultivators who had died in battle. The opponents that were gathered from these were not to be underestimated. And the more spirits gathered, the stronger the might of the banner would be. With the flag in hand, Fei Yu's confidence was boosted. He believed that after this battle, the power of the flag would increase by another level. Zhang Yan also saw the flag in the sky and immediately recognized its background. In order to scare their enemies, Jiling sect had purposely revealed the strength of the flag. However, he was clear that there were no remains of venerable mortal Slu within. However, even if such a person were to appear, he was not afraid. The sect guarding treasure had it, and so did he. Since he could not see Lingya, he would not hesitate to use it when the time came. If it was someone of the same generation, he was not afraid. Even if it was a West Continent cultivator, if they were to appear here and go against Qinsong, he would kill them all with a single slash of his sword. Chapter 1202. Fei Yu waved the 10,000 spirit banner and released two people. At first, their figures were blurry, but they quickly solidified. After a few more breaths, they were no different from real people. Zhang Yan looked at them and sensed them. He realized that the two people that came out of the banner were indeed at Grotto Heaven Realm. However, they were at most at stage 1. Their eyes were dull and they didn't have much spirituality. It didn't matter how many of such opponents came. He could kill them with a flip of his hand. The other party should know this as well. Now that they were released, they should be trying to buy time so that they could use even more powerful techniques. As for Fei Yu and the others, he already had a plan. Therefore, he didn't care about them. He just activated his powers and pressed down on the 5-element hand. At this moment, the dozens of pillars could no longer withstand the huge force. One by one, they broke and fell to the ground, causing the surrounding mountains to shake. Under the control of the spirit banner, the two of them rushed up. At the same time, they activated their dharma and rushed towards the huge hand. In an instant, they clashed and an explosion rang out in the sky. However, this was like hitting a rock with an egg. The two dharma were connected and didn't manage to block it at all. Under the huge hand, they shattered. Elder Guan Yu had wanted to see if he could go forward and block the attack together with them. But when he saw the scene before him, his expression changed and he quickly retreated. When Fei Yu was watching the battle in the sect, she had already seen how strong the 5-element hand was. However, when she saw it for herself, she was still shocked. This skill obviously relied on strong powers to suppress others. This was also the hardest skill to break. If one didn't want to face it head-on, the only choice was to avoid it. However, when he saw that the huge hand was about to land, he still stood far away. He nodded to Guan Yu. The latter hurriedly made a hand sign and two more Dharma images rushed up to stop the opponent. He himself took out an essence stone. After a while, balls of spiritual light rose up and quickly melted into the atmosphere. It enveloped both him and Guan Yi. This was the Jiling sect's defensive true artifact. It was called the Jade Transformation Space Barrier. After using it, layers of barriers would appear around the body. Usually, there would be hundreds or thousands of them. No matter what kind of Dao technique or supernatural power it was, it had to break through these layers of obstacles. If it was just a normal attack, even if he stood still, it would take more than 100 attacks to hit him. That was not all. If this treasure had an endless supply of magic power and spiritual vigor, then the air barrier would grow. The longer the battle dragged on, the harder it would be to break. In the end, the treasure master would be in an invincible position. As a result, he had the 10,000 spirit banner to attack and this treasure to defend. Both the offensive and defensive sides were complete. However, although Fei Yu was quite confident in this battle, she knew that she would not be able to win in a fight of magical powers. Accidents could happen at any time, and no one could say for sure that he would win. Because of Zhang Yan's past achievements, he still felt uneasy even with just this, so he secretly released a few invisible teleportation talismans to the outside world, and moved to the edge of this empty space to settle down. If the battle situation was unfavorable, then he only needed one step to retreat to the next empty space, and he would not lose his life. At this moment, the two phantoms flew up into the sky. Similarly, they could not stop the five elements' giant hand. However, with Guan Yi's control, they did not just charge around blindly, but also knew how to cover for each other. More or less, they were of some use. This caused the hand to slow down for a moment. However, after a few breaths, the giant hand suddenly used its mana and shattered the two phantoms. With the power of the sky, it pressed down and hit the air barrier. Instantly, there was a heavy thud that shook the heaven and earth. Fei Yu was hiding in the depths of the air barrier, and under the layers of protection, she felt the surroundings shake as though it was about to break. Even though he knew that this treasure was tough and had not reached its limit, he could not help but be shocked. This was because Zhang Yan could not be measured with common sense. He was afraid that an accident would happen. To be safe, he did not dare to be stingy. He took out a porcelain bottle from his sleeve, removed the cork, and poured it down. The water vapor instantly melted into the air barrier. This was pill water that was refined using pill jades as the source, along with many precious ingredients. When fighting, it could be used to replace one's mana to maintain this treasure. With this water, the air barrier quickly stabilized. Under the pressure of the giant hand, it no longer shook. Only then did Fei Yu relax. Without anything to worry about, he could finally use his methods without worry. He waved the flag, and a black smoke shot out, forming a path. From within, a well-built man in a loose robe with big sleeves walked out. When this person came out, his expression was slightly lost. However, his gaze became firm. This was a Western Continent side sect cultivator, Huan Rong. He was rather famous tens of thousands of years ago. Back then, he died under the joint attack of several heavenly demons, and his body was left in the demon cave. Later on, a Jiuling sect cultivator took the banner and refined it into a banner spirit. Under Fei Yu's urging, this person soared up and came before Zhang Yan. He asked sternly, "Since you're a human cultivator, why are you stopping us?" Although he still had some remnants of his spirit and consciousness from back then, his impression was still from 10,000 years ago. At this moment, under the control of the 10,000 spirit flag, he would see the enemy as the person who was stopping him from moving east. It was also because of this that he could use all his methods, which were similar to when he was at his peak, and not at a disadvantage. Zhang Yan knew that he was under the control of the 10,000 spirit flag, and it was useless to say anything. He sneered and raised his finger. Instantly, a wave of sword light shot out and slashed towards him. Huan Rong could naturally recognize that this was a killing sword weapon. Right now, he did not have anything on him. Even if he could block one attack, he would not be able to block the continuous slashes. Thus, he wisely chose to retreat. With a shake of his body, he turned into a light smoke and escaped. He was so fast that he could almost keep up with the sword light. However, even though he was forced to move outside, he did not go too far nor too close. It was obvious that he was still waiting for a chance to counterattack. Below, Fei Yu knew that Huan Rong would not be able to deal with Zhang Yan alone. Therefore, after summoning this person, she summoned 7 more flag spirits at one go. As long as he had enough time, it would not be difficult for him to summon another 10 flag spirits. If not for the fact that the spirits on the flag had gone out too far, their mana and spiritual opportunity would be depleted by several folds. Moreover, there were many restrictions when it was used, making it very troublesome. Jiuling's sect would have long replaced the Blood Soul sect as the second largest sect of the Devil sect with this item. After the 7 banner spirits came out, they turned into streaks of light that shot up into the sky and surrounded Zhang Yan. Without saying a word, they began to attack him with their respective techniques. Fighting against one with many, they did not need to care about themselves at all. They only needed to focus on attacking the enemy. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he took out the Heaven and Earth leaf. A ray of clear light rose to protect his body, and with a shake of the Qing Hong sword, it turned into countless sword lights that slashed towards these people. At the same time, those divine arts also came flying over. With the Heaven and Earth leaf blocking them, even though the attacks caused waves of ripples and trembles, most of the attacks were blocked. However, some of the attacks actually passed through the Heaven and Earth leaf and landed on his body. Although their power had been greatly reduced, he was still unharmed because he was at the 5th transformation of the strength path. Ordinary cultivators would find it hard to survive the encirclement of 7 to 8 people of the same generation. Just this round of attacks would be enough to kill them. Those flag spirits did not expect him to not dodge, but to fight against them instead. Caught off guard, 4 of them were instantly killed by the Qing Hong sword. One by one, they exploded, leaving only balls of scattered essence chi in the sky. Even if these people had grotto heaven cultivation, if they did not have extraordinary divine arts or magic treasures to protect themselves, it would be very difficult for them to block the attacks of the killing sword weapons with just their bodies. Fei Yu waved the flag, wanting to gather these broken flag spirits again, but at this moment, she saw a bright ray of clear light flying out from above. It looked like a jade slip, and it circled in the air and swallowed all the scattered essence chi. This was like water that had its source cut off, and it could no longer gather. He could not help but be startled. He did not expect Zhang Yan to actually have a method. However, these flag spirits were truly engraved on the flag, and as long as the flag was not damaged, he could summon them again with some magic power. After Zhang Yan killed a few of the flag spirits that surrounded him in the sky, he forced the rest to retreat far away. Because he knew that these people could not be completely killed, he did not spend any more effort and thought to himself, "It's about time." He raised his hand, and among the surging profound chi behind him, a purple chi rushed into the sky. In an instant, lightning flashed in the sky, and there was a rumbling sound. In the next instant, the entire sky was filled with purple lightning, and it densely formed a large net that covered the sky. This was the divine art of Qinsang's school, Purple Sky God Lightning Net. So long as the violet sky divine lightning net appeared, it would surge over ceaselessly, and it would advance ceaselessly without end. Moreover, it would be stronger than the last, and in the end, a myriad of strands of lightning would converge at a single point before abruptly exploding out, and its might was practically like the heavens and the earth were collapsing. Long before the battle, he had ordered the 2 clones to accumulate magic power and silently use the divine art. Just now, everything he did was to restrain the opponent, and not let them escape. At this moment, the divine art was completed, and this region was already enveloped in it. Without his permission, it was difficult for anyone to escape. Under such power, no matter how many banner spirits there were, as long as they did not have the protection of magic treasures, they would not be able to withstand the bombardment of the lightning. Fei Yu also knew about this divine art, and even understood that it could trap the enemy. However, every divine art had a way to break through it, and he felt that even if the opponent used it, he could rely on the jade light sky barrier to deal with it. But after a while, he did not think so anymore. As the lightning struck down, Zhang Yan and the killing sword swept away the few banner spirits. Then, the purple lightning from the thunder tide came crashing down, shaking the air barrier. Every banner spirit that was released was shaken to death, and soon, the entire world was filled with purple lightning. Other than that, there seemed to be nothing else in the world. Guan Yi saw that the air barrier was gradually being damaged, and although there was continuous replenishment, the opponent's attack was too fast, and there was no time to fill the gap. If this continued, they might be defeated. He turned around and said, "Sect leader." Fei Yu said in a low voice, "Don't panic, it's not like we are at the end of the line." He hesitated for a moment, then turned around and bowed to the 10,000 spirit banner, and said, "Respectfully, third-generation sect leader."